Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the public. This is the Milton Conservation Commission public meeting for June 28th, 2022. We invite all citizens, members of the public, applicants, opponents, neighbors with suggestions to speak. We simply ask that you identify yourself when you do speak, and we welcome your thoughts and questions. Also, as a matter of formality, we introduce ourselves. My name is John Kiernan. Wendy, do you want to go?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Wendy Garko.
Ingrid?
Ingrid Beatty.
And Tom, are you there, sir?
Tom Palmer.
And Mr. Doyle. Arthur, you're still muted, I think.
Thank you, John. Good evening, everyone. Arthur Doyle.
Thank you very much, Steve. And did we get you?
And Steve Ivas, Conservation Agent.
All right, I think we have everybody. We have a quorum, so we're ready to begin. First on the agenda is request for determination of applicability at 1 Governor's Road. Paul, are you ready to proceed?
Yep, that's myself right here. My wife, Shira, she's calling it separately, but she's also on the call.
All right, thank you. Hi, Shira. Go ahead. Do we have anything to share the screen for this, Steve?
Yes. I do have something to share the screen with. And let's see if that works.
Yep.
Can you see that?
Yes, we can, Steve. Thank you.
Wonderful.
You may have to blow it up a little bit, but we can begin. For members of the public, we did have a site walk in June, and the commission at an open public meeting did have an opportunity to go to the address 1 Governor's Road and to look at the scene. It abuts Unquity Brook just as it goes into a culvert and goes beneath Adams Street and Squantum Street before it outlets into Gulliver's Creek. Paul, can you tell us what the application is for?
Yeah, I mean, you can see most of it here is proposed on the plan. We did remove some brush along the Adams Street boundary. What we have proposed on the plan is to set a granite curb line along the property line abutting Adams Street, to construct a new walkway from Adams Street to our front door, as there is none existing. It's just off the driveway, and some new plantings, throughout the front yard.
And what about removing any trees or brush from the banks of the stream?
Everything that we intended on removing has already been removed. We didn't realize at the time that it was, subject to Conservation Committee review. So everything that is currently existing and what you saw at the sidewalk is to remain, with new plantings to be added.
All right, can you tell us what was removed though, and then also tell us what you intend to plant?
Mostly along the front of Adams Street. There was a lot of brush. I think California privet, there was a yew tree and also some Norwegian maple. A lot of it had been overgrown with bittersweet. We had it trimmed by landscapers about a year ago after we moved in and treated the bittersweet, but everything returned. So what remains on the corner right now, there's a couple of Norwegian maples that still remain that we were able to save. And the privet hedge, a couple of small maples were removed.
All right, we have a replacement performance standard. When trees are removed within our jurisdiction, they have to be replaced. So can you tell us what you're planting? And maybe it'll work out. You may need to plant additional either shrubs or trees, but why don't you tell us what you're putting in and give us the quantity of shrubs and trees?
Yeah, we haven't made any final determinations on exact species. I talked with Steve about it. Everything will be native plants. Something that we have been thinking of, a red maple, perhaps an apple tree, some river birch, and some service berries. Hoping to get like two large trees in there, one on either side of the walkway. They're denoted by those green circles with the number 11 key. Probably the red maple for one of those, and probably the river birch right there, and the red maple closer to the road. new, yeah, 14, hopefully maybe something like a smaller tree, like a service berry, something that size that you know won't impede the walkway eventually. Planting beds along from there out to the corner of the property with Governors and Adams, and also in a new planting bed adjacent to the house. There's already some existing hydrangeas there, and you know we'll probably plant some like low shrubs in there, something that won't you know grow up past the windows. And anything that we plant on the corner of the property as well, there is a restriction of anything greater than 3 feet on 20 feet from the corner boundaries. So anything that we plant on the corner of Governors and Adams will all have to be you know relatively low shrubs.
All right, what would be very beneficial to us, and I don't think this necessarily will have to slow us down, but we would need a landscape plan that's a little bit more precise than you've described. You've described well what you're thinking of, but we'd like to know where it is and what it is and make sure that it's native species. And then we could approve it and say, yep, that's the plan that we like and that you like, and it's acceptable to us. Can you actually fill in with some definitiveness what plants are going where?
Yeah, I mean, I can send. If you look at the on this plan over on the right hand side, there is a planting key. It addresses the species of existing plantings, and yeah, it kind of outlines what I just described. It doesn't specify exact species further proposed, but is the committee happy with the quantity and locations of what is proposed currently? You know, with the stipulation that you know anything new that goes in will be a native tree or native species tree or shrub.
Steve, I know we've been there and we had an opportunity to see the trees that were removed, but Steve, do you have any sense as to what the sum of either the DBH or the whatever it is, circumference at breast height?
And were removed? No, very difficult to say, John, without seeing the trees. You know,
I saw some very small. Yeah, we're talking, you know, 4 or 5 inches in. Well, actually, they were less than that in diameter.
right.
They were probably that vicinity circumference-wise, but that's all that I saw was that. Tom, you may have paid more particular attention to the number and the size of the trees that were removed. Do you have a memory of that, Tom?
I'm sorry, I don't. I looked at it and I just don't recall seeing them at all.
I don't either.
John, I noticed that there were a couple in the vicinity of 3-inch diameter along the river.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I should say along Angry Brook. But
All right, so I'm having difficulty reading the suggested plants in the right-hand column. Steve, if you've got it in front of you, maybe you could identify that. And does it appear that let's go back to use the easy rule of thumb, the 3 to 1. And particularly if they're in the 3-inch category, we'd be looking for 6 trees. So we appear to have 6 there, but it's pretty small for me to read on the screen.
Right. And I can't see part of the screen myself, actually.
If you can see the ones marked 11, as Mr. Malloy said, those
Right.
are larger than the others, and they're called large natives. And I think he said that he was thinking of a red maple or river birch.
Right.
Yeah,
And
correct.
then number 14 were to be serviceberry.
Yeah, or something of like a similar size.
Right. What were you thinking about number 3, for example, down here?
No, that's an existing Norwegian maple.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
thanks.
so the gray circles are existing plantings, and the
Right.
dark green circles is what's proposed.
Right.
Steve, for your record-keeping purposes, Hans has joined us.
Well, thank you.
And Hans, you may have come in late, but we were discussing our site visit to One Governor's Road. And I don't know if you had any recollection of the number of trees or the size of the trees. I think the consensus is that there were just a couple of them and they were relatively small, somewhere in the 3 to 4 inch diameter.
Yeah,
Do you
I'm
have a
sorry,
memory of being there?
I don't recall offhand.
Okay. All right. Well, again, Steve, is it possible from what's listed on the plantings plan to assure ourselves that we have a sufficient replacement standard performance?
I would like to see one or two more, maybe smaller trees like the serviceberry, perhaps, just to make sure that we've got that DBH covered that was taken away. That would be my suggestion, just a couple more.
Do they have to be on site or could they go into the bank, Steve?
Yeah, that would be one of my, I guess not a concern, but I would definitely look for some feedback on locations. I mean, when we laid these out, we tried to, kind of lay them out optimally. So, one thing isn't overgrowing another.
Right.
Do you think that we can, is it possible to station things a little more densely?
Paul, there's another opportunity for you, and that is we have what we call a virtual tree bank, where you can actually just buy a tree and put it into a sort of a credit account for the town, and the town can plant it elsewhere.
I mean, I think that's certainly something we'd be interested in. What was there before was so densely overgrown, and like I said, we spent a significant amount of money, with landscapers to try and prune and save what was there, and it was really overgrown. So I think that would definitely be an option that would appeal to us. We're not against planting more trees, but we don't want to stuff them into a small area, and have issues down the line. Also, something that is of concern. We don't want to push anything any closer to the sidewalk than they currently are right now to squeeze anything extra in. There is some low-hanging utility lines. A lot of what was there had been pretty aggressively pruned by Eversource as well in the past 6 months.
Right.
So we'd like to keep everything closer to our property than what's already shown. What is already shown is kind of as comfortable as we're pushing it like towards the sidewalk, if that makes sense. I think if we push it any further, we're going to be obstructing utility lines eventually.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes, sir.
Having grown up on the street next door and known that neighborhood very, very well, I think the tree bank, in combination with the recommended plantings on the plan presented, would be an excellent solution, because I agree with the owner that overplanting in that area, particularly at the intersection of Adams Street and the confluence of Adams Street with Squantum Street, would probably not be the interest of the community.
All right, well said, and I think that makes sense. So it looks like there's a consensus. Paul, just for you and share his knowledge, that when you essentially buy a tree and put it in the tree bank, that virtual tree bank inventory that we have, it's $500 a tree, which essentially is $350 for the tree, which is generally the cost of a 2.5 to 3 inch caliper tree. And then the $150 on top of that would be for planting. So it comes out to $500 a tree. I just want you to make sure that you're aware of that. I also
I think I've seen some of those around the neighborhood. Is that the like the town shade tree program?
It's separate from that, but it's sort of an adjunct to that. Yeah. We have trees that we don't necessarily put on the trees. For instance, we put some at Turner's Pond from our inventory. And we've got a number of trees in that inventory from Wallaston Golf Club, because if they remove trees, they're trying to get trees away from the survey, so they put it into the tree bank, and then we have an inventory from which we can plant where appropriate.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's certainly something we'd be interested in. Like I say, we're not opposed to putting something else in here in the lawn, and I'd like to add too that what this plan represents is an initial planting phase. Over the next couple of years, we hope to add more shrubs and build it up over time.
All right. One thing for your knowledge and one thing for the public's knowledge. The first one is that there is a 2-season survival rate, that you have to have a 75% survival rate of what you plant over 2 growing seasons. So that fits with exactly what you just said. And the second thing, the public should know that the actual a portion of the culvert was that is town property was actually destroyed by weather and age, I guess. And Paul and Shira were kind enough to repair that on their own. And that's a benefit to the town that you didn't have to provide. So we thank you for it.
Yeah, no, but we're new to the neighborhood, and hoping to put down our roots here for a long time. So.
Yep. Can I jump in here for the proposed plantings? Would it be possible to get more specificity regarding the genus and species?
We'd be happy to submit a list once we've decided ourselves. I think at this point we'll probably be looking at, the end of the summer, I think, or maybe early fall. But yeah, no, we'd be happy to submit a list ahead of time.
That would be great. And just for, for sort of shopping around, the Native Plant Trust in Framingham is a really good source, if not to buy from, but certainly to take a look at their catalog in which to choose from. They're a little on the expensive side, but they're really good quality, but their catalog is fabulous. And you might be able to get the same species elsewhere for maybe a better price.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. Thanks.
And
Can I chip in? Sorry, this is Shira.
Shira.
Hi. So just to the committee, would the committee be open to us kind of making a couple different options per each genus and species, so that for each space, so that, depending on what we see and depending on what looks healthy and what might fit out of those, we might pick one versus kind of being specific as to the space. I hope I didn't misunderstand, but I just wanted to clarify.
Yes.
That seems fine with, yeah.
That's good with us. We want you to be happy, and your artistic and agricultural all of your knowledge we will appreciate.
And one more thing, this is Steve Ivas. I was looking at the walkway here. High bush blueberries can be planted very close to walkways without any problem. And this is a good sun exposed place here as well. So you might want to just consider them. That's all.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. We actually just planted one at the back of the house a couple of weeks ago.
And high does not have to be, 6 feet high. They've got, sort of varieties that are not low bush, that are very close to the ground, but sort of 3 to 5-ish. There's some new varieties that are, right around 3, which might look really great.
Yes.
And then you get blueberries.
Well, the birds picked off everything that we had on.
I've got to put nets on mine.
Yeah, we learned. Next year we'll know.
Mr. Chairman?
Any other questions from commissioners?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Just so that the applicants understand that the survival rate is related to the certificate of compliance. Yes.
Did you understand that, Paul?
Yeah. So when do we have to reapply for the certificate of compliance in what you said it was two growing seasons?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah. And just in terms of next steps from here, do we need to await any kind of formal notice to kind of proceed with what we have proposed right now, or would the next formal application be the certificate of compliance?
Well, you actually have a request for determination of applicability, which we would have to vote on. And what we can do, it would be to it's a little bit like putting the cart before the horse, because what we do need is a specific landscape plan with the number and the species of the plants and the trees. But I think we have a sense of, and you have a sense what we want, and we have a sense of what you want, and I think we can meet. Yeah. We could do it, we could vote on the request for determination of applicability contingent upon your submission and our acceptance of that landscaping plan. We have done that in the past. It's consistent with our practice. And that would, it wouldn't slow us down. However, before we get to that point, we do have to ask for comments and questions from abutters and members of the public. And I don't know if there are any abutters or members of the public that have an interest or would like to make a comment or ask a question.
I believe one of our neighbors from, I think, number 3, or no, I guess what would be number 5, governor, or 4 governors, sorry, submitted a letter to the committee expressing their support. I'm not sure if that made its way to everybody or not. It had been.
Yeah, we got that. I read it.
Okay, good. All right, well, perfect then. Is there, I've got it here, yes. Are there any other comments or questions from commissioners?
I have one, John.
Wendy?
Mr. Malloy, you had said that you had removed a lot of brush from along the brook, including bittersweet. You had said that you had treated the bittersweet, and yet it had come back. I was just wondering if you could explain how you've treated it and what your plan is for moving forward.
We didn't treat it ourselves, so that was about a year ago. We hired a local landscaping company to trim and prune, and they had first identified the bittersweet and treated it. I'm not sure exactly how or what they used to do it, but even already, you can see out there it's already starting to come back. So that is something I guess we'll need to address. I'm not too well versed in the best course of action to treat it, other than continuous pruning.
Yeah, my understanding, and Steve and Ingrid, perhaps you can correct me or add to this, but my understanding about bittersweet, and a lot of the other invasives that we struggle with is that you really just have to relentlessly cut it back, and that herbicides really don't work quite often, and that do you know if the landscaper who you had hired used herbicide to treat it?
I'm honestly not sure. I could probably find out, but I didn't inquire at the time.
I would just add, and maybe our conservation agent can comment, that if herbicides are going to be employed to control an invasive such as the bittersweet, that a registered, a licensed company would be employed.
Agreed entirely, particularly since we have the brook right literally adjacent.
Exactly.
Literally.
Yeah.
And this wouldn't be a licensed arborist, Paul. This would be somebody who is licensed, usually by the state, to treat with herbicide prevention chemicals. And we would probably, if you move in that direction, we should probably have a letter from that company indicating what they plan to do, what treatment they plan to employ.
Yeah, and identifying by actual chemical name.
Yeah. I think for now we'll probably stick with the plan of just pruning it ourselves. Unless it really gets out of hand, we'll look at that down the line. But we've no immediate plans to bring anyone in to treat it.
Right. We just passed out a line because as
Certainly.
time passes and you get busy with your family, the bittersweet can really take over.
Yeah.
That's true. All right, is there
and you'll kill trees.
Yeah.
That's which you don't want to lose your investment in the trees that you're going to be planting.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. I mean, you can still see it on the existing, on the Norway maple that we retained. You can see all the dead vines, hanging up out of the higher branches. We were able to cut everything down low, but you can see how much it was beginning to get choked out up top.
Well, if you don't like that Norway maple, you could always give it to John. He's a fan of the Norway
I
maple.
love them.
I saved them. I love them too.
Yeah.
Those vines
That's
that
an
you
inside joke.
All right. Any other comments or questions from members of the public? Hearing none, I will ask a question, and it really is a question. Is there a consensus here that we could kind of reverse the order and have a vote on a negative determination for the RDA contingent upon an acceptable landscape plan that addresses all of the issues that we brought up today, the species, the native species, the variety of species, um, and, and, and sufficient size and quantity to be in conformance with our performance standard for replacement of trees. And I think that based on our sort of a general vague recollection of what we saw on the sidewalk and Steve's analysis, that we need those 2 additional trees more than what we see here presented. But contingent upon that plan being submitted, I would suggest we could issue a negative determination based on those conditions. Is there a consensus to do such a thing?
Second.
All right, well, it wasn't really a motion, it was sort of pre-motion. I'm looking to see if there's a consensus to move in that direction, but is there such a motion? If there's no motion, then
Mr. Palmer move. I couldn't tell. Tom, did you make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion for the negative determination with conditions.
And I'll second.
All right, is there any further discussion? All right, all in favor, I'm gonna ask for individual votes. Tom, how do you vote?
Yay.
Arthur, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ingrid?
Aye.
Wendy?
Yes.
Hans, I can't see you, but I think you're there somewhere.
Yes.
All right, and I vote yes as well, John Kiernan. So that's unanimous, negative determination, and it will issue, but not issue until such time as you submit the plan. If you can submit it to Kathy Bowen, Paul and Shira.
Yep.
And then she can get it to Steve Ivas, and the commission will coordinate with Steve and accept the plan, assuming that it is acceptable.
Yeah, certainly.
Right.
Very good.
All right. Then I
We'll be in
think you're good to go. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Shira, very much.
Great. Thanks for your time.
All right, bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is a request for certificate of compliance at 52 Hemlock Drive.
Hi, John and everybody. Thanks for having us.
Well, there you are. Steve, do we have a letter or a screenshot for this?
Yes. Let me get to that, please. We've got, there we go. And there's a letter as well. I'll show you the letter first.
Good.
Are you seeing that by any chance?
Not yet. We're still seeing Governor's Road.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me see if I can get rid of that. How do I get rid of that is the question. Sean, are you still out there? Share screen, and I can do that. Okay, how's that?
There we are.
No, it didn't stop the Governor's Road one.
No, we're looking at the letter of compliance.
Oh, you are? Okay, fine. Let me just make that larger.
That's
There's the letter of compliance first, and then I'll go back to the site plan, if that's okay.
Sure. Do the letter first.
Sure.
Okay. It says this letter to confirm that Bill Sienkiewicz and Terry Radford have complied with the order of conditions set forth, recorded in with the numbers, page 75, and as amended, etc. Substantial compliance of plan showing proposed addition in Milton, Mass, dated 10/27/2020 was met, and that was signed. You'll have to scroll down. Joseph Calabro?
Yes.
PE? All right, and that's what for the public's benefit, that is what we require from a professional engineer, that substantial compliance was obtained. Can you now kind of walk us through, I don't know, Bill, if you can do that for us? What was done?
Yeah, so we sought this order of conditions, and basically what we did was we did a full master addition, a full master suite addition to this house, which basically crept into the corner of what was our conservation pieces here. And so we went through a few different phases of planning and development, and with your guys' approval, we basically crafted our plans to go with everything, to seek this sort of compliance and to, go with what you guys produced with the order of conditions. So we basically, that's all we really did. We did some decking in the back. We did the master suite. We kept it open underneath. And that's pretty much it. I sent pictures to Kathy also for this. I don't know if you got any of those.
Yes.
Yeah, we did. We've seen a number of pictures of the site. We've been to the site quite often. Actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. And one of the things that you did at our request was you pulled the deck back. You had a cantilever deck originally designed
Yes.
right where the cursor is.
Exactly.
And you pulled it back. So we're grateful that you agreed to that. And I think it makes it fit, and it honors our 25-foot non-disturbance zone.
Yes.
So we thank you.
Exactly. Yeah, no, my
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from commissioners? Hearing none, are there any abutters or members of the public that have a question or a comment? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the certificate of compliance for 52 Hemlock Drive?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Is there a second?
I second.
Thanks, Tom. Any discussion? I'll do an individual vote. Tom, how do you vote?
Yay.
And Arthur, how do you vote?
Yes.
I can't see you, but Wendy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ingrid, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Hans, I can't see you, but how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, John Kiernan. Thank you. You're good to go. You've got your certificate of compliance with a unanimous vote.
Thank
Great,
you so
thank you
much.
so
Have a
much.
great summer.
Yep, we
All right,
appreciate
you
it.
too. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Now, the next two items on our agenda, 3 and 4, request for determination of applicability at 1259 Brush Hill Road. And then there was an amended order of conditions at 1259 Brush Hill Road, which is number 4. These are lots C and D. The applicant has asked for a continuance. I think there are a couple of outstanding issues. I don't know whether or not we actually received all of the plans, the revised plans in their full engineering size. And I also understand that there is a request by the Division of Fish and Wildlife, Fisheries and Wildlife, for additional data. And I think that Steve Ibis has actually corresponded with the applicant and requested additional data, some soil borings, because there was, at our request, there was a sort of a second look at the placement of the line. And this is a case that is very, very close. The building is going to be very close to the 25-foot non-disturbance zone. So we were paying particular attention. But with all of those aspects still being discussed, the applicant has asked for the continuance until next month. Unless I hear otherwise, I did put a call into Joe Federico this afternoon, who is the applicant. But it was his representative. Steve, who did the letter come from? Was that Christopher, Tom Christopher?
Christopher Thomas of BSC.
All right, so we have that in writing. It's in the file that it's the request of the applicant. So with that, we'll continue that until the July meeting. Next on the agenda is number 5, notice of intent 648, 652 Canton Avenue. This is a continued hearing.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may, I just note that we have a communication from Bob Sweeney, the Indian Cliffs Neighborhood Association president, and he is with us this evening. Just so that you.
That's perfect. That's great. So does the applicant want to start?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, Phil Cordero from Allen and Major Associates, representing the applicant. I'll likely be very brief in my discussion and presentation tonight, just wanting to hopefully go over a couple of quick things with the commission. And then we will likely, similar to our previous applications or the previous applicants, request a continuance from this board to the next meeting. What I was hoping we could focus on here this evening, because we have not yet received any communication from a selected peer review consultant from the Conservation Commission. And I know it was of great interest to the commission to have somebody weigh in on your particular interests on this application, and would obviously like to hear from them before we continue any further in terms of our discussion on the property. So if the commission could kindly weigh in on that, we're obviously anxious to get that moving, certainly fund that 53G account and enter into contract as necessary with the commission's selected peer review consultant. And then I think if the commission would like to discuss it, I think we are in a position we could likely just recapture that we had our site walk at 652 Canton Avenue and reviewed physically on site the additional wetland delineation that was performed by Ecotech Associates, Scott Morrison, professional wetland scientist. And as I understand it, your agent, Steve Ivas, and Scott met on site just to confirm a couple of the comments that the commission had on site in terms of the wetland flag placement. And it's my understanding that Stephen and Scott are both in agreement in the delineation that's represented on the plan that's shown on the screen here this evening. So those are my updates, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, and maybe we can go through them.
All right, if we can start at the last comment you made, Steve, since you've got up on the screen the plan, can you go to the two areas that we were interested in, the lines? And I know one was at the sort of closer to the top of the screen, where your cursor is now. Can you just describe what happened there, and then go to the area of the stone wall where we didn't know whether or not the wetlands had perhaps leached underneath the stone wall?
Sure, certainly. So the first location, John, was in between the isolated vegetated wetland here and the other wetland line that was put on for the BBW. And right in here is what Scott termed a berm. We looked at the soils there, and there really aren't any hydric soils within about 20 inches of the surface right here. And we made a closer look at some of the other sort of berms in the area. And it looks like this area was a spot that earth was cast onto. And there are other locations around this residence that look about the same. So it's really interesting. Many years ago, probably 50 plus, there was some earth that was probably dumped here. And it was a wetland at one time, and now it's not. That was my conclusion, and Scott agreed with that. The second location was over by wetland flag A3 and A4, and we did some soils borings in this area, just on the other side of the wall. There's a stone wall right here, not shown on the plan, I don't believe.
No, it's not shown on the plan, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Phil. And we found the same kinds of things. Even though there were wetland indicator species, there wasn't hydric soils on the other side of the wall. There was a third thing that we looked at. I made the comment that the test pit areas, this is a test pit wet here, and there's another test pit dry. There's a test pit up right there. I made the comment that the test pit centers of the plots were not 30 feet away from the line as required by the Army Corps of Engineers in their methods manual. So we went and walked over to 30 feet away, both locations, and did some more looking around. And what happened was, if we took a look at the various strata, overstory, shrub story, etc., the wet area got wetter, the dry area got drier, 30 feet away. So that's a good thing. That means that what Scott saw at 20 feet or so was reproduced at 30 feet. So I was very happy with the results, not changing any of the results of the plan.
All right, if you can go back a step, you indicated that on the other side of the wall, you did not find hydric soils, but you did find plants that were
there are
wetland
some,
indicated.
That's correct. There are some wetland indicator plants, but they aren't they don't make up a community. There are other upland plants in that area as well. So you need an entire community of wetland plants.
And do you have an estimate as to the percentages? Because I know in the performance standards, there are some suggestions of percentage wetlands indicators.
Exactly. No, we didn't do the calculations for that. We did it by eye. I've got a little bit of experience, and Scott has some as well. So 30 plus years of experience looking at things by eye. And we agree that there's not the community of wetland plants here that we should have seen should the area have been a wetland area.
All right.
So
And for the public,
I kind of agree with John in terms of percentage. I mean, community just seems like a vague term to me because it's relative.
Oh, I'm sorry. It should be 50% or more wetland indicator plants. That's really what we're looking for. 50%.
Okay.
That's what we're looking for.
Okay.
51%.
And what you're saying is that 50% was not met, that it was less than 50% of wetland indicator plants. Is that correct?
Yes, in some of the stratas. In one of the stratas, there was more than 50%, but other stratas, there were not. That's exactly correct.
well, you're losing me on the on other stratas.
I agree. I'm a little confused as well.
I can explain that.
Thank you. Go right ahead, Tom.
Strata means layer in terms of height above the ground. So in the DEP manual for delineating wetlands, you're supposed to list the species in each layer, and those are the herb or ground layer, the shrub layer, the sapling layer, the tree layer, and the vine layer, if any. So you look at those layers in turn, and then find out which species are dominant. And so that's basically the program you go through. And I think what Steve was saying was, one of those layers was wet dominant. I was thinking it might be the tree layer. Maybe Steve can tell us.
That was actually the shrub layer. We just had a lot of sweet pepper bush, which we see way up gradient in many places. As you know, the sweet pepper bush is FAC. It's not a FAC wet plant. So it is a wetland indicator under the regulations, but oftentimes does not show doesn't show in a wet area, and sometimes it goes way up gradient as well. So
like a red maple, we'll do that.
That's correct. Red maple, same thing. Thank you.
Okay, and Steve, so is the explanation then that this, and I'm using the word ambiguous loosely, but does this, sort of ambiguous results, do you believe that that's a result of 50 some odd years ago that it was altered, that the area was altered?
Yes, for the area between the two wetland areas, in that berm area, that area was altered. I'm not sure about the other area by wetland flag A3 and A4.
Okay.
I'm still struck by the fact that if the performance standards say that if it's greater than 50% with wetland indicators, whether it's at the shrub layer or at the, at grade.
Oh no, there's a calculation.
Why wouldn't that be wet?
No, John, there's a calculation. In fact, if you look at the sheets that were provided, there were a whole bunch of sheets provided with the notice of intent, and there were calculations on those sheets. Okay.
Well, I'm well aware of that. We were all there, and we had
every shrub layer. So it's got to every single shrub layer contributes to the calculations. Okay, so you can have 100% in a shrub layer, and then 0% in other shrub layers, and it's not a wetland.
In other strata.
Exactly, another strata. That's correct.
I understand. All right. And at the risk of sounding like an I daughter and T crosser, I just want to make sure that if it's wet, then we call it wet, and if it's not, we say so.
Right, and we went through the method, basically.
All right. Well, I'm comfortable with all the other flags other than those two. And we agreed that we would defer to you, or I agreed that I would defer to your expertise to go back and look a second time. You've described the soils, the lack of hydric soils in the first location. I'm comfortable with that. And I think you've given an explanation that it would have to be all the strata that would result in more than 50%. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. With that, then I'm not speaking for the other members, but I'm comfortable with leaving the lines as we observe them and confirmed all but these two areas when we were there. And how does, Tom, how do you feel on that? I mean, this is your area of interest and expertise as well.
I agree with Steve. It's sort of a complicated area, but Steve went back and looked, so I'm good with it.
All right. Any other comments or questions from commissioners before we ask for questions and comments from the public? Hearing nothing, then other members of the public?
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Hans.
Are you asking about questions relative to the wetland line or questions in general?
Oh, we're just talking about the wetlands line. We haven't gotten to the other, you know, the fill, the change in elevation and
Okay.
bounding issues and et cetera.
Sorry, then no, I don't.
Not yet. Okay. All right, fine. Are there any comments? We're just talking about the wetland delineation at this point. Are there members of the public that would like to ask a question or make a comment? All right. Hearing none, then let's move on to, that was actually the last point you made. And I understand that you asked us what progress we've made on getting a consultant on board. And Steve, can you get us up to date on the last, there was an email exchange about 10 days ago, and I thought we were close to having somebody with a viable proposal for us. Can you get us up to date on that?
That's the last thing I saw, John. I referred it to you. Sorry. Don't mean to put you on the spot, but we did have a proposal from two firms, and I thought you were going to make a decision.
Oh, well, it wouldn't be my decision. It would be our decision jointly. So if we could get it, and this is it's going to be deferred anyway, and I believe based on what Phil said, but we can get that done immediately if we can get those two written proposals sent around. My apologies. I was traveling. I was out of the state last week. And that did slow me down, but I think we've got in hand the two proposals. I had asked for revisions from one of them, Steve, as you recall, because I do not want to limit the consulting services to simply reviewing the applicant's proposal. I want the consultant to be able to respond to any and all questions. They have to be relevant questions, obviously, but any and all questions relating to hydrology. So that's why I resist the suggestion that this is simply a peer review. It goes beyond that, and that's pursuant to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That's the statute, Chapter 44, Section 53G. They are our consultant for areas related to whatever the field of expertise is, and in this case, it's hydrology. So I do not want to limit the engagement of the consultant to simply looking over the proposal, but rather to respond to our relevant questions as to hydrology in general, how it's impacted, whether it's in the proposal or not. But I think we can move this week actually to bring that to fruition and make a decision. I'm not sure that it eventually will have to go to the select board, but my belief is that we should make a decision, share it with the applicant, because under the statute, the applicant has a right to object to the selection. Steve, you're going to have to help me on this one. I am on the spot. Do you have the names of the two people that submitted proposals?
Hydro Geocycle was one, and GZA is the other.
All right. And GZA we've already retained on the other 582 rather, Blue Hill Avenue.
Yes.
So Phil, I don't know if you are familiar with the other one? Give me that-
I am, Mr. Chairman. We're familiar with both firms professionally. We don't have a dog in the fight that there would be no conflict of interest, obviously, in terms of you selecting one or the other. We'd obviously, for the applicant, would be interested in just reviewing the proposals, the fee structure, so we can certainly fund those accounts, but we would defer to the commission's election on whom you choose.
All right. So Steve, can you assist in sending that out to all commission members tomorrow? I don't know if we're going to have a site walk, a public meeting. We should make a decision at a public meeting, but I certainly do not want to wait until next month to make that decision. But I'd like all commission members to see the proposals. If we have to do this, we can have a brief public meeting in order to discuss it and make a decision. But I guess the first step is to get those proposals sent around, maybe through Kathy Bowen. She could do it.
Yes.
All right. All right. So Steve, we'll move on that this week.
So, all right. Yes, we appreciate that, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. We're obviously anxious. We just want to keep the progress moving forward in the right direction. There obviously is a lot to go through technically. We want you to be made comfortable with the application through your consultant and whatever questions you want to ask them within the confines of 53G. So that'd be great if you can circulate that info and we'll just get it moving. Yeah.
All right, and now let's go back to some of the other issues. And I know, Phil, what you said, and you're really not in a position to respond at this time. Mm-hmm. But Hans, I know you had some questions that you want to frame for us here.
No, I remember in a previous meeting we had asked for the construction. Was it the construction plan? And I don't know if we've seen that or not.
Hans, you'll forgive me, or through the chair, obviously, to Hans. I don't have a recollection of a specific request from the commission on a construction management plan. I know that we have, I'm just checking through my notes here to see if something comes up. You know what, Hans, excuse me, I am flipping back. My notes indicate that you did make a request for the construction management plan, and the way we had framed it through the last meeting, which goes back a couple of months, is the commission was interested in the record that was compiled through the Zoning Board of Appeals process, of which the construction management plan was part of that. It was my understanding all of that information was going to be made privy to you, to the commission, through your agent, in terms of interdepartmental coordination, I guess, for lack of a better term. We can certainly provide it to you, but it was my understanding you wouldn't get it internally within the town.
Do you know what part of the application that would be found in?
The construction management plan?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It was not included within the notice of intent application.
No, I mean the other application.
Through the ZBA, it was an addendum to the initial application. So during conversation with the zoning board, they requested a construction management plan with pertinent details, and it was provided as a supplement during the hearing process.
All right, I'll see if I can find it.
Okay. All right, and for the public's benefit, we're obviously in the last century in terms of electronic data files. We have, actually through the auspices of Arthur Doyle, requested funds from the select board to improve our electronic filing system so that it would be easily accessible, not just to the public, but to the commission members themselves, because we have not done any kind of a data dump from the ZBA to the Conservation Commission because we don't have the capacity to do it. But Steve, is that something that you could work with Kathy in terms of getting it onto our system in some fashion, or at least getting it out electronically to the commission members and having it available to the public?
Yes.
So John, the ZBA maintains a office site a cloud site that has the 40B applications all listed. That's why I was asking. I mean, that's part of the that's publicly accessible. Just wondering, you said it would be in the addendum or supplementary materials?
It was supplementary information. I mean, Hans, you're absolutely correct. And I was going to make mention of the same, which is the Zoning Board of Appeals has a SharePoint that has all of the documents are already available on the town's website. I'm looking through it on my other screen. We have it in the revised project documents under the Zoning Board application for this site.
Okay.
And John, we do not have, the Conservation Commission does not have a SharePoint for the public yet. Just for your information.
Right, and that was part of the request to the select board.
Right.
And I thought you might be able to, get us up to date on that. But the point was to be able to share electronically the data between and among the several agencies in the town.
Just to confirm, is that the draft construction management plan?
Yes. Yes, it's under the dated 11/29 revision folder, if that's where you're looking, sir.
Date on the document is November 22nd, 2021.
The date on the document, I'm not certain. I'm just looking at the initial folder, but it's from November of last year.
Okay. I think I found it.
All right.
Yes.
Now, given what's gone on, and obviously we're going to have to push this into the future to get our hydrology consultant on board. But in the interim, are there other questions or comments that commissioners would like to make at this juncture? If not, we can open it up to the public. All right, members of the public, is there anyone that would like to ask a question or make a comment? I don't hear anything.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I was muted. Ned Corcoran here on behalf of a number of the direct abutters. One of the questions I think we would like to see is a substantial discussion on the issue of low impact development as it is required, it's part of the state stormwater standards, and whether or not and to what degree the team pursued low impact development as a means of developing the site. Our sense is that infiltration is a component of low impact development, but the introduction of 5 to 9 feet of fill over a 5-acre portion of the site is certainly not low impact development, and they ought to explain to you, and this commission ought to be very concerned about whether or not the development is pursuing low impact development designs, particularly because the substantial portion of the development is proposed to come right up to the 25-foot setback from the intermittent stream that's located on the Kelly property at 660 Canton Avenue.
All right, those are valid questions, and that's certainly something it is an area that's on our radar screen, and that's exactly why we need the consultant from the field of hydrology, because we're concerned with 6 to 9 feet of fill. It's got to have some impact somewhere, and I'd just like to know what it is. But having said that, I think from the commissioner's perspective, we need to await that consultation with whomever it will be. But from Phil's point of view, you may want to respond to Ned's comments now, or you might want to defer. It's up to you.
Mr. Chairman, we would like to defer. We would like to defer because we want that opinion piece from your consultant regarding the application materials, and we will respond accordingly to the questions raised through there. And then if the commission has continuing questions, would obviously prefer to respond to them then.
I also have a question similarly. I'm just raising a couple of issues that I think are important for consideration as the process goes forward with the consultant review. Second is groundwater mounding and a robust groundwater mounding presentation, and the sharing of data associated with that with the consultant and with abutters consultants as well, so that there's a proper and complete analysis done over the forms of types of testing necessary to address the issues of wetland impacts here.
Now, can you be more specific, Ned? I know you've raised, general questions about data sharing, et cetera. But are you looking for, deeper, boring test sites, or what? I'm not sure what you're asking for.
I would defer, I'm going to introduce Michael Mobile, who is a consultant working with us, and also Scott Horsley, who can get into a little bit more specific detail on what we're looking for, why it's important. And so I would ask you to take Mike Mobile first and then Scott.
Sure, and that's probably going to be helpful to everybody, including Phil, so that he knows what's coming by way of questions. That would be very helpful. So well, Michael or Scott, whomever.
Mr. Chairman, may I interrupt before you turn the floor over?
I think Michael was first.
Obviously, the commission can entertain whomever they wish. We are aware of what Dr. Mobile and Dr. Horsley will mention. We've certainly encountered this through the Zoning Board of Appeals process. And while again, you could entertain them here this evening, what I would respectfully request is that we hold off on their testimony until we've had your consultant weigh in. They can obviously put forth their opinion pieces, but we're anxious in making sure that we have technologically reviewed everything to the commission's wishes through your consultant before you hear from opposing abutters in terms of some of the cloudiness that they would like to put forth into the record. I think it would be premature to have them expound upon the groundwater mounding at this point, the hydrogeology at this point, because the commission hasn't been properly, for lack of a better term, educated by your consultant as you see appropriate. So we'd like to request to delay their testimony until we have further input and we can look at it all holistically together.
Well, I'm trying to speed the process because I know oftentimes boards slow down projects and slow down their decision-making process. And I'd like to avoid that if possible. So the more information we get, I think it's the better. But I do understand your point. So let me ask you a question. Before the ZBA, Scott, did you and Michael, did you submit written reports?
We did. We did, yes. Sure.
They are in the record that you would obtain through the ZBA file, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so Phil, you know what's in there. Scott, Michael know what's in there. We're the only ones that don't know what's there. And we'll certainly get it. I don't think that it will, we're certainly not going to prejudge anything and there will be no decisions made, but I'd like to hear the concerns that might help us frame our questions. And I understand what you're saying, but I assure you that we will not prejudge or make any preliminary decisions or take any position whatsoever. This is just information gathering at this point.
We appreciate your positioning, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, you can proceed as you see appropriate.
All right. I think it's appropriate to hear from them because we're just framing issues at this point. Mm-hmm. Michael, did you want to comment on this?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, and good evening, board members. Michael Mobile of McDonald Morrissey Associates, appearing on behalf of butters to the proposed project. I am a hydrogeologist by training and a mathematical mod flow modeling specialist. That's what our company specializes in. Been in business since 1990, so more than 30 years of experience in that specific area. Just for very brief introduction of me personally, I hold 3 degrees. Bachelor of Science in Hydrology, a Master's of Science in Environmental Engineering, and a PhD in Civil Engineering. All of my studies in the area of mathematical modeling, approaching 20 years of professional experience working with groundwater models day in and day out. It's certainly something I am uniquely familiar with. And Mr. Cordero is right. This issue did come up and came up many times at the ZBA level. And the fact of the matter is that the applicant has a mathematical model, a mod flow model that they were relying upon quite heavily in their analysis. It is effectively an engineering calculation. They are relying on the quantitative results as information they are using to suggest that their proposal is meeting applicable requirements, whether state or local. The problem is that this calculation, this model that they've put forth is very poorly explained. They have a summary report that provides some grainy images and some brief background, but does not provide any details that would allow someone competent and someone who understands modeling to understand what's meaningful in modeling analysis, meaning the assumptions, the inputs, and some of the decisions, the approaches used in the model. And so I've asked for more information. I've asked for what is common practice to share the modeling files so I can actually review them and they could be transparent with their calculations and we can understand what's going on. That request was refused at the ZBA level. I followed up with a request, a series of questions, just asking for more information, that was ignored. So what I'm imploring the board to do, please, 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 is to require the applicant to make this modeling analysis transparent. Otherwise, you're relying upon a black box calculation. You have no sense as to really what's forcing those results. And I will tell you from my experience perspective, looking at even the limited amount of information they've provided, there are many concerning aspects of what I've seen reported that unfortunately I can't verify because they're not willing to provide the files. I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt to say I can't absolutely be sure until I see the files, but they're unwilling to provide them. So I don't know where that leaves me other than to say I can't tell you whether or not what they've put forth as calculations is reliable or not. So again, I would just repeat my request, please do require this applicant to provide those modeling files so their calculations can be evaluated and confirmed or errors can be found. If they're going to be transparent, that's how it should be. And quite honestly, any consultant that you hire who is thorough in their review should be looking for that same information. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for your time.
I think a simple question. And I understood what you said about the data going into the modeling and the modeling system itself. You think needs to be transparent, and sounds reasonable to me. But my question is this: are there any just factual missing links? Like we've got another project to consider tonight, and in that case, the opponents are saying, "Look, your soil bearing." They were looking for a saturated thickness, and the soil borings only went down. I'll make up the numbers: 4 feet instead of 20 feet. I just made them up. Is it that simple? Are you saying that we have factual data, to a 4-foot depth, and we need factual data to a 20-foot depth? Is it that simple, or is it more complicated than that?
Well, it's hard to even tell, Mr. Chair, because again, we have a report that says certain things were done, but the truth of the matter is it's the values that actually go into the model, and I can't tell what was actually used in the model because it's only present in a written report. I will tell you in my experience, many times I've reviewed models where a report has said something is done, and when you dig into the model files, that is absolutely not the case. So that's one level of concern. Now, I mentioned reviewing that report, I saw some areas of concern, and there are indications, like looking at how they have designed their model, it would seem like at the edges of their model, they have effectively forced the model not to predict changes in groundwater level. When some of the questions being asked are, is this project going to change groundwater levels in those areas? So if you're saying the answer to that question is no, but the model can only produce an answer of no, I'm telling you that model isn't an appropriate tool to answer that question. So it's things like that need to be, more details need to be provided in order to understand really what's going on with this modeling analysis and whether or not it's appropriate to answer many of the relevant questions in this case.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I guess my view is, being privy to the data, the input, and the calculations that lead to the determination is not an unreasonable request.
I would agree.
Does that make sense?
Yes, and I can provide citations to literature common in this area of science that certainly support it is standard practice to share your information, share your modeling files, provide enough details where a reviewing scientist could reproduce your analysis. That is not possible based on what has been provided by the applicant to date.
Yeah, understood.
Any other commissioners have a question or a comment? Before we even ask for the public, Scott, did you want to make a presentation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll be brief. I don't want to repeat anything that Michael said, but I'll just add that the project proposes to infiltrate more than twice as much water going into the ground, which is we refer to as recharge, than current conditions. So I think at this point, we all agree water levels are going to increase because that's basic physics. The model that Mike is talking about, ModFlow, is a tool, a widely used tool in the industry to quantify the fact that we know there's going to be significant groundwater mounting and it's going to rise. And as Mr. Cordero just said, he wants a full technical review by the third-party consultant. The only way they can really do the full technical review, if he really means that, is to review the files, the modeling files. Without those, you cannot do a full technical review. And that's what we've asked for. I've worked on many other projects where this is standard procedure, that modeling files are shared. And if somebody doesn't want to share modeling files, I really only can think of a couple reasons why they might not want to. So I think it's really important that the commission require this. It's a transparent process. As Mike said, he really is got some phenomenal expertise in this area. And I think we all, I even believe the applicant wants to make sure this model is run correctly. And we can get there. We can get there if we have the model, so if we all understand what is going into the model, the assumptions that are being made, and what the outputs are. And according to what we've seen so far, as you know, this site is almost surrounded on two sides by wetlands. The model is already saying there are water level changes in those areas. But again, we haven't reviewed the details of the model, we don't have it. So I think it's imperative that we get this model and that the third-party reviewer have the model as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. And Phil, you don't have to respond at all, but as I understand it, the modeling data was requested at the ZBA but not produced. Is that a big issue? Because if it is, then wouldn't the Conservation Commission say, okay, let's start all over again and have the third party consultant do it?
Sure. Mr. Chair, just again, to be very brief, we can respond in terms of affirming how things transpired in the Zoning Board of Appeals forum. The groundwater mounding analyses is certainly a complex issue. Your consultant is going to make mention of that. What we ultimately did through the Zoning Board of Appeals discussion is certain levels of groundwater mounding analysis were provided in consideration of the Massachusetts stormwater regulations, which is what is required of the application, both before them and before you in the Conservation Commission notice of intent. Through the conversation, and obviously the Dr. Horsley and Dr. Mobile and Attorney Corcoran and other testimony that was provided, they certainly raised concerns, just as they've done here tonight and in previous hearings. And we engaged in a more robust analysis of groundwater mounding through an outside consultant on our team. And the ModFlow software that they are referring to is sort of the next level of analysis, an amped up analyses that hydrogeologists, groundwater mounding consultants, and those that specialize in this field would use. The engineering requirements, however, don't rise to the level of needing ModFlow. So what ended up happening, sir, is we went through an exhaustive review of data. As you can imagine, the consultants for Attorney Corcoran's abutters and the doctors that presented here this evening certainly didn't agree with our consultant, and we reached an impasse. And ultimately, the conclusion of that impasse is we were arguing about intricacies of data in a very in-depth model that wasn't necessary to comport with the regulations for an application that was in front of both the Zoning Board of Appeals and ultimately here in front of the Conservation Commission. I can certainly say that that did not set well with most parties, but it is the cold, harsh reality of the truth. And that's what we're going to suggest here this evening. And our emphasis in not providing the data at that point, and specifically the data is the electronic files, the input files that our consultant was using to publish his reports. We elected not to share that with them. There's no requirement for us to do so. The data is in the report that was provided. It's in the Zoning Board of Appeals files. It's publicly viewable by all parties. And we felt that all of the information that was necessary was in there. Certainly providing the data was used for one specific purpose. It was not to support our conclusions or our assumptions. It was to use it as another point of attack. And we were at a point where we were not looking to be attacked from a different angle and elected not to provide it. And we'll continue to hold that stance through this commission proceeding as well. And I know it's unfortunate, I know it's difficult, but what's ended up happening is we will devolve into a discussion of advanced groundwater mounting calculations that really aren't necessary. And I think they end up confusing, misleading, they're inflammatory. They will paint predictions of very dire consequences that they're just not practical and they're not real. And it will ultimately yield an extensive, a lengthy process of review through the Conservation Commission. I suspect the commission will ultimately be more confused by the information and will likely result in ending up in the same position we did with the Zoning Board of Appeals, where the professionals will ultimately never agree and the boards are thrown in the middle of that situation. So it's in front of the commission here now, just to be specifically clear, is the groundwater report that Dr. Mobile is referencing was provided through the Zoning Board of Appeals process. It has not been included with the notice of intent application because it is not required to meet the stormwater standards or the request for analyses under the Wetlands Protection Act. So at this point, there is no requirement to provide that additional analysis that Robert Rosine had done under the Zoning Board of Appeals process. So I apologize, maybe that's a very circuitous way to get to the answer of saying the same thing that we said during the other meeting, but it is our position at this point.
Mr. Chair, if I could just respond.
Good, Ned, go ahead.
It'd be very interesting to hear what your consultant asked for and the types of questions that he asked, because this groundwater mounting report appeared in January of this year. The hearing was closed in March. They refused to share the data. They refused to provide an opportunity to review the inputs in the data. There were a couple of hearings and debates about whether and to what extent they should be provided. They weren't provided. The applicant moved to close the hearing on the 40B application. There was a statutory deadline that we ran up against. The applicant refused to extend the deadline for the closing of the hearing. So the hearing was closed in March. There was a 45-day period pursuant to which the Board of Appeals had to issue its decision, and the decision was filed on May 2. I can tell you that during their deliberation, they were extremely concerned that they didn't have access to the type of data they thought they needed to establish whether or not there were significant wetland impacts and other impacts associated with groundwater mounding, et cetera, as both Dr. Mobile and Dr. Horsley have said. They were frustrated. They didn't have access to that information and came very close during the deliberation to actually denying the permit. Ultimately, they granted the permit with a significant number of conditions, and both sides have appealed that appeal. Yeah. It is our opinion that what is being proposed here is so far beyond the reasonable pale of what anybody would do with respect to a development of a piece of property. Introducing a 5 to 9 foot level plateau so that they can install a groundwater infiltration system is crazy. And they presented a plan. They didn't present anything that stood behind it. And they said, please accept it. We're trying to get at the truth of what's going on with the groundwater and what could happen. We've got experts ready to go. As I said, I think it will be very interesting to hear what your consultant requests. And we'll certainly provide input, sets of questions, and other material that the commission can take into account as it works with its consultant moving forward.
And Mr. Chairman, what we are asking here is for your consultant to review the materials independently without having the well water poisoned for them. And that's our starting point. Obviously, the commission will ultimately have questions. The record is readily available to them, but we're looking for them to render an opinion on what they have now in front of them and the questions that you are raising to them. We know it's not a one and done process. We're not suspecting that we'll be in and out of here quickly. We need to get the first pass done. And we know from our history with the town's consultant, the town's peer review consultant in the Zoning Board of Appeals process, that he ultimately did not feel that the additional mod flow analysis was necessary, that the integration of incredibly deep data was not necessary for him to render an opinion that the project met the standards it needed to meet. And that's what we're trying to start with your consultant here, before, again, we poison the water with them that they're about to drink.
All right, well, don't be concerned with, poisoning a well, either for the commission or hopefully for the consultant.
Sure.
But I do have a question, because as I'm listening to you, it sounds like you're saying that you've met the regulatory minimum and therefore nothing else is required. And I just want to make sure that you understand that we're not looking for a sort of a floor and a ceiling within which the regulation operates, but we're looking for what's the impact on the wetlands generally. And if we need, that's why I am so adamant about not restricting this to what most people want to call peer review. I resist that, because if we ask questions that are not necessarily related to the regulations, but as something as simple as, look, how is this going to impact the folks that live downstream? And whether or not it's a regulatory floor or it exceeds the regulatory ceiling, it's part of our mandate to say, what's going to happen to the wetlands? Where's the water going? So my gut reaction is that we need data, and if you've got good data, then I assume we'd want to ask you for it. But if you're unwilling to get it, and I understand what you said, but why wouldn't we then ask our own consultant? What do you think? Do you think you need the data? And if not, then you go out and you do it. And I'm trying not to duplicate effort here, but it sounds like we're going to get pushed into the situation where we're going to ask for the modeling analysis done by our consultant, whoever that's going to be.
So, and I could appreciate that, Mr. Chair. And again, I know we have a long way to go. I don't want to necessarily paint a black and white picture, as you put it, the floor and the ceiling. I think we do, though, need to start within the confines of regulatory requirements. I mean, that needs to be the consistent starting point, because this is a comprehensive 40B project, which is an affordable project. Because of that, we can't be susceptible to more burdensome conditions or analyses that a normal application would otherwise be judged against. I know it's an intensive project. I know we have high density. I know we have earth and fill. We have large stormwater systems. So I'm not suggesting that there are de minimis situations here. I'm just saying we have to look at it that if this is the level of information that the commission would review on any application that comes in front of them, then certainly. But if this is a specific application of increased high standards for this project, then we're starting to get off the rails in terms of how the project should be reviewed to be in compliance with the comprehensive permit process and the State Wetlands Protection Act, which is what we're asking the commission to render an opinion against at the end of the day.
And the question is, how would the commission react normally if a project came in with 5 to 9 feet of fill over a 5-acre area proximate to a wetland.
No, we don't have to debate this because I understand both positions. And I think it's simple is better. What we always do is ask, where does the water go? It's got to go somewhere. So that's whether that's regulatory, whether it exceeds the regulation, or it's articulated in some performance standard somewhere. That's really part of our mandate. We're going to figure out what happens to the water. Where does it go? And
We
I'm not
agree.
sure where that
Simple-
fits into the
simple is
regulatory
better.
scheme, but we believe that's our mandate.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I've had my hand up and others are speaking without their hands up, if I may. I'm trying to follow
I
rules
see
here,
there
but
are other
we've
hands
got an
in there.
unruly crowd here. I just want to specify, Phil Cordero did say something which I really need to correct, and that is that this groundwater mounting analysis is not required. I was served on the Stormwater Advisory Committee that put these standards together, and I'll show you chapter and verse where it is required. There are 3 volumes, the Mass DEP Stormwater Standards. I'm sure you deal with them in your proceedings. This project, because it is within jurisdiction, is required to do groundwater mounding, especially because the systems are within 4 feet of high water table. There's no question about it. Volume 3 of the Stormwater Handbook discusses 2 methods to do that groundwater mounding. One is a method called hand tush, and the other one is mod flow. So Mr. Cordero's representation that mod flow is some supplementary thing that's not required, that requires a closer reading of volume 3 because it's right in there. It's very clear that is one of the models. And in this case, because of the multiple systems, as Mr. Cordero just stated, and all the complexities of the site, hand tush doesn't work. And I think the applicant knows that because they ran mod flow. So this is clearly within your jurisdiction, and it is a complex model, it's a complex site. And again, we need the model to evaluate what the impacts are. You're absolutely right, Mr. Chairman. We need to know where the water goes. And the only way to really know that is to fully understand what was done with the model. Thank you.
Well, yeah, hold on, Scott. Before you go, could you put the cost aside? I'm not trying to assign responsibilities, particularly economic responsibilities, anywhere. But could you do it? Just start from scratch, or do you?
Well, Dr. Mobile is the expert here. I've actually been involved in mod flow modeling, but I don't run the model myself. Dr. Mobile does. We could certainly do it, but there's a cost that clearly is something that the applicant should provide. As I say, it's required. And again, I'll show you if
No, you don't have to. I asked.
Okay.
My question was different.
Could
you do it?
Yes, sure.
So it can be done.
Of course it can be done.
If I may
All
jump.
right, but I mean, would you have to get onto the land? Would you have to do soil borings? Would you have to do analysis and
Well,
testing?
there is a fair amount of site data here, which has been generated, which has in fact documented the complexity of the site. There's shallow water table in many, many places. It varies by, I think, 6 feet seasonally in some cases. So we have that data. And so I think there is enough data to run a model. I defer to Dr. Mobile, whether or not additional data would be, additional data is always helpful, but whether there's not enough or not, I defer to Dr. Mobile. But sure, a third party could run a model with that data, but it seems crazy to do that in that a model has already been developed and that the applicant has already indicated that that's what they're basing their conclusions on. So why don't we just look at that?
But if we have a consultant in the arena of hydrology, why wouldn't we ask, and maybe this question should go to Phil, why wouldn't we ask them to run a new model if the data is available?
You could. We're not suggesting otherwise, Mr. Chairman. We're not suggesting that you can't engage them to run an additional model. I think what I'm trying to lay out is that we've presented an application, would like the application reviewed. You will undoubtedly have questions on the application. You will guide your consultant to answer those questions for you. And if part of the process is they're running a model, then that's what they would need to do.
Understood. Okay, thank you. There are other, Michael, your hand is still up.
I just had one very quick.
I've got some other questions. I see other hands now. I wasn't looking at those before. Michael, you had something else?
just a very quick addition to what Scott started with relative to the requirements around a groundwater mounting analysis. That is indeed a requirement in this case, given the stormwater conditions that we're talking about and what's being proposed. So really what I'm asking is very basic. If an analysis, a groundwater mounding analysis is required by the Mass Stormwater Handbook, one has been performed, then the details of that analysis, the details of that calculation need to be provided to determine if the results are reliable, if they've been derived correctly, if the proper assumptions have been made. I'm not making any sort of crazy request. I'm not trying to introduce any sort of vagary into this process. I'm very experienced in this area, and I'm just trying to understand what's being done. So I reject what Mr. Cordero is trying to indicate about my intentions here. I'm just being a responsible scientist and trying to understand what they are saying is a result of their calculation. That's a fundamental component of science and engineering, and to suggest that they're, or to overtly be unwilling to share the details of that calculation is quite
Okay,
honestly shocking.
I understand, and I'll make the comment that I think everyone here has acted as a gentleman and ladies. I think everybody's been above board and civil, and it's perfect. You can disagree on things, and we can just put them all out on the table and discuss them. Dan Hill, I see you got a hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to echo what Mr. Horsley was stating with respect to what the commission can require and contradict what Mr. Cordero was saying. The regulations that govern your review of this process are found under 310 CMR 10, and section 10.054H specifically states that the commission may require, supporting plans and calculations when, in its judgment, the complexity of the proposed work warrants this professional certification. Then the regulation goes on to say that the commission may require supporting materials, but including but not limited to registered landscape architect, land surveyor, scientist, geologist, or hydrologist. So the regulations are very clear that the commission can require additional information. There's case law to support this, including matter of Bosworth, David Bosworth development out of Dighton, where this issue was arisen. I couldn't find any cases in the context of mod flow, but clearly the regulations contemplate that the commission has the authority to ask for additional information. It's not limited, as Mr. Cordero said, to specific standards. And so I would echo the comments that have been made that the electronic files should be provided to the commission.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm not suggesting that. I'm not limiting the commission's information. You had asked me a direct question. I apologize. I'm not trying to debate the issue. You had said, could our consultant weigh in? And the answer to that is yes, of course. And under the premise that Attorney Hill just laid out, you're entitled to information that you deem appropriate to render a decision ultimately. So we're not suggesting withholding of any information or process. That's all.
Understood and appreciated. Thanks, Phil.
Mm-hmm.
Ned Barden, I see your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. This is Kathleen Patton. I'm on my husband's laptop, Ned Barden, PhD, Kathleen Patton. I'm not a civil engineer. My father was. I grew up at his knee. I learned water always runs downhill. And Mr. Kiernan, your question is apropos and absolutely necessary to answer. Where does that water go? Where will it go? We, a couple hundred of us, live across Canton, directly across Canton, on Gulliver, Elm, and Wendell Park. Wendell Park stream drains that wetland. That water will come downhill. It will infiltrate all of our basements. That's not the only problem. It will flood Wendell Park stream. It goes into the brook stream, Pine Tree Brook, that goes into the Neponset River. That is all watershed, should be protected, but so should we be protected. All of us have these incredible, many thousands of dollars worth of amendments to our foundations to protect us from water, because this is a very tricky and sensitive area, water-wise. Anything up above us is going to come down. We will not be able it will not stand. We will become the repository of that water. That how many feet sponge of soil that upon which they're going to build this structure, will that be enough to absorb that water? I contend it will not be. And I would like to ask that question. Can someone prove that that's not going to be a problem for the several hundred of us down here? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. And I have to tell you, I lived at 36 Elm Street, and I had a lot of water in my basement. So I know what you're talking about. Any commission members or other members? I don't see any other hands. And I think that at this juncture, if there are others that would like to speak, then speak up. But otherwise, I think we're probably in a position to take the next step, which is to get our consultant on board, and we'll try to get that done this week so we can move the process along. So unless I hear a comment or a question otherwise, then I suggest that we continue this matter with the assent of the applicant until our July meeting. Steve, what's the date on the July meeting?
The date of the July meeting is July 12th.
July 12th. All right. Well, hopefully we can make some progress between now and then at least get those proposals finalized and hopefully get them before the select board for approval. All right. So can we continue this matter until the 12th, Phil? Are you good with that?
Absolutely. We could have continued an hour ago, but it's okay. Yes.
I know that, but I think this discussion was both
yes.
Civil and genteel and helpful to the commission members.
You bet. Absolutely. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
All right.
Mr. Chair.
Good night, Don. Then we'll move now to the next item on the agenda, number 6, which is 582 Blue Hill Avenue.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chair. Again, for the record, Phil Cordero from Allen and Major Associates representing the applicant for 652 Blue Hill Avenue. Respectfully, I would like to formally request a continuance with no additional testimony this evening. We are in receipt of GZA's review. We just received it yesterday afternoon, and we have not had a chance to digest it fully. So we would like to move to the July 12th meeting for this application.
All right, and for the public's benefit, we did receive the report from GZA, which is a consultant, a hydrological consultant for this project. There are a number of comments that I shared with Phil Cordero and the applicant, who was the applicant's representative. And I also sent a copy to Dan Hill, who was counsel for the some of the neighbors. So I think it is appropriate to continue this because I think there are a lot of substantive questions that have been presented by the report from GZA. And I think it's appropriate also that Phil and his team have an opportunity to respond to them. But I will take comments or questions from commissioners if they'd like to discuss anything further. Nobody? Wendy, anything?
No, sir.
All right, so I'm good. Tom, are you comfortable continuing this?
Yes, I think there's a lot more to talk about, but now is not the time.
All right, are there any, hearing no objection from the commissioners to the continuance, are there any members of the public that would like to be heard on just the issue of continuing this until July 12th? I'm actually looking for hands. Dan, I see your hand. Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just thought it might be useful for you to hear a couple comments I had on what the GZA letter didn't include, which we wanted to get addressed. And I don't know if you want to hear that tonight. There were just a handful of things I could run through in 5 minutes that I just wanted to make sure GZA knew were issues that we've raised in prior letters. Because I know Mr. D'Ambrosio is, I think, on the Zoom tonight and might be interested in hearing that.
No, I actually agree with that because it may be of an assist to Phil Cordero and his team to know if there are other questions coming, so he could be prepared to respond to those as well. And I have a question for you, Dan, and you may be able to locate the person that provided it, but Early on in this process, some of the neighbors had submitted to us videos. And there's one video of, it's almost like an open channel. It's water just pouring off a hill. And I have yet to identify where it was. Now, the person that submitted it, whose name I don't know, indicated that it was on site. But I don't have a clue where it was from. And I don't know I believe it was a woman. I believe I know where she lives, and I think she's an attorney, but not in the area of environmental law. And I'm looking at Ann Moody McGrath, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but were you the person that submitted a video? Because there's a video out there with a ton of water coming out of it, and the commission received it. We just don't know where it's coming from. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
If it's there's one video that I know of that my husband took, which came from the bottom of the I guess you would call the carriage house of, the existing structure. There's an outfall pipe. Is that what you're talking about?
It was from an outfall pipe. I know the video that showed the rainstorm and the surface water. It's not that one. It's the one with water coming out of an outfall pipe. Yes.
Yeah. So that would be, do you have the video?
I've got it somewhere in my personal email, I don't have a personal email. I've got my business email. I'm sure I can find it. I just want to make sure that all of the consultants have that video, but also we need to know where it was.
I can tell, I know exactly where it is. I can show, we can show it to you on the site. I can show it to you on the site. It is on the site. I would obviously not be able to walk on it without permission, but it's at the bottom. It's at the back of the carriage house, not the main house, but the carriage house.
All right. Could you forward that video to?
I can try. I don't know if you may not know this, but my husband was killed in an accident on March 8th on Blue Hill Avenue.
Wow.
In front of the project.
I did not know that. My prayers, that's horrible. My condolences to you and your family.
You. I appreciate it. So the only reason I bring it up is because his phone was destroyed in the accident as well. There are some videos that I have. I just don't know that I have that, but I can try my best to get it. And it may be that he has sent it to Dan in the past too, so Dan and I could work together to try to find it.
All right, Phil, I think you're sharing your screen here. Is that the area?
Yes, it is. I did it without permission because it was germane to the discussion, but the video that you're referring to from our initial hearing is the outfall pipe circled in red. It's from the roof drains from the carriage house. So there is the gutters from the carriage house connect through here, and there's an outfall pipe in a stone embankment. And that's what that video was depicting. So during a rainfall, you were seeing the collected roof water coming out of that pipe. Let me clear my drawings just so you can see the plan. You're looking at the demolition plan that's included with the drawing package. But this is the area where that video was taken, Mr. Chair, members of the commission.
And where on this diagram would your detention basin be?
So let me zoom out. I'm sort of crossing a couple of different streams here. In the carriage house, okay, I'm just going to advance to the next slide, if you don't mind. So hang on. So the carriage house outfall would be in this general area. Obviously, this is the stormwater basin.
Correct. Okay.
Right. But
that's perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for, Phil.
Sure. But to be clear, that pipe gets removed as part of the demolition of this project.
Understood.
Okay.
It's just that the commission members had seen it, but
Mhm.
nobody had any idea where it was actually located.
Sure, no,
That's very
happy to
helpful.
clarify it, sure.
Thanks, Phil. Thank you very much. And Dan, I go back, I didn't mean to interrupt you, and I didn't know if you had finished.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to briefly address the issues that weren't included in the GZA letter. And we should first start by saying we very much appreciate the GZA comments. We actually concur, I think, 100% with the recommendations for additional materials that GZA included, and we'd ask that the commission basically incorporate those recommendations as requests to the applicant. A couple issues that we just wanted to flag. First, construction management planning is a very important issue for this project, and it's something that John Chessier raised in our March 2022 letter. This is particularly important with respect to the west building that's going to be essentially installed in 12 feet of seasonal high groundwater. We've raised this issue in the past with the zoning board, and John raised it again in this spring, that this project's going to require a significant amount of dewatering during construction. And so there needs to be really a detailed plan, not just an outline of what a construction management plan looks like, which has been provided, but an actual detailed plan on how the building will be constructed in the groundwater. So this issue is particularly germane to conservation commissions because the MS4 permit that we really haven't talked much about, and probably the Concom hasn't probably dealt with it that much. The MS4 general permit requires this type of site plan review for construction management as part of the general permit that's applicable to Milton. And so it's not even discretionary. The commission really needs to require the applicant to provide these details during this process. And we provided a comment letter on that effect to the zoning board, which I can forward to the Concom. The other issue is the proximity of the retaining walls to the infiltration systems. That's an issue that John raised in March. There are walls really right up against the infiltration systems, and Mr. Cheshire had raised a concern about interference with the water and the walls and hydrostatic pressure. This is also in conflict with the DP handbook, which requires setbacks between slopes, vertical slopes, and infiltration systems. So we would ask that GZA take a look at that issue as well. There's also the issue of mounding within infiltration system 3, and that's an issue that Mr. Horsley raised in his March letter. Mr. Horsley noted that based upon the applicant's own data and calculations, there's likely to be a mound that's going to break out in the infiltration system. So you're going to have actually breakout from the mound that's going to interfere with the ability of the system to hold the water and to prove compliance with the stormwater standards. So that issue should be looked at. And then finally, we've raised a real concern about the offsite drainage analysis. So part of the drainage system here includes an outfall that is directly connected to the municipal drain system in Meeting House Lane. That water goes down Meeting House Lane, crosses Alfred Road, and it is eventually discharged into Pine Tree Brook. This is actually an issue that the commission should be looking at. It goes to the performance standards in terms of the standard number 2 and the rate of runoff leaving the site. But it also goes to the town's compliance, again, with the MS4 permit, because this is a direct connection to a municipal drainage system. So we'd ask that the GZA, the peer reviewer, evaluate this issue. The developer provided a offsite drainage infrastructure analysis back in June of 2021. That was reviewed by the zoning board, but not really at the level of detail that it really requires. And I think the zoning board was essentially saying this will be reviewed during the NOI process. So we'd request that be part of the scope of the peer review. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Phil, these will be questions raised, so this will give you an opportunity to do some homework and have a response.
Like it's like a movie trailer at the movies. Coming attraction.
Yes.
You bet.
Yes, indeed. All right. So with the applicant's request, it appears appropriate to continue this until our July meeting, which is actually pretty close in time, July 12th. So hearing no objection, we will, with the assent of the applicant, continue this matter until July 12th. Thank you very much, all.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Good night. So next on our agenda is a request for certificate of compliance 105 Cabot Street. Do we have an applicant? Steve, do you know?
Not sure. I had some questions from an engineering office today about the 2-year period. And they were asking that question. And I said, yes, there's a 2-year period for survivability of all planted vegetative materials. And I also noted that it would be nice to have, and in fact, we require a request in writing, but nothing came in.
Oh, you mean the PE stamp that yeah, everything's in substantial compliance with the
No,
order conditions?
Just a request to continue.
Oh, understood. Well, if they're seeking it, I guess they would have to be here. If they're not here, then we're not in a position to issue it because it's not being formally requested at a public meeting. But I agree with you. We do need a PE, and I have to tell you that I was concerned initially that there's a very small area of lateral support. It's a pretty steep hill, so I think it's going to be very important to take a look at this. I'll defer to the engineer on the engineering component of it, but it is a steep hill. It drops down behind the new addition, and I presume that it's filled in, and the shrubs and grasses and trees, et cetera, are holding the hill. But I think we might want to take a look at it, or Steve, you might want to take a look at it. I'm not sure the whole commission has to go through there.
Yes, did about a month and a half ago, but haven't seen it since then.
All right, and how did it look a month and a half ago?
The slope looked stable. The trees a month and a half ago were the wrong trees. They were all non-natives. I'll leave it at that.
All right, but they're not new trees. Aren't they old trees that are still holding the slope?
Nothing was planted on the slope.
Right.
The trees were planted down below the slope, at the toe of the slope.
So I understand. All right, but I don't think, my memory is that in our order of conditions, we didn't have a planting plan, did we? I don't think we did.
No, but we required 3 trees to be planted. That was
the, and 3 trees were not native?
That's correct.
Okay. Why? What were they? You know?
They planted. I know they planted a couple of willows that were not native. I don't remember the third one right now.
All right. Well, are you dealing with the homeowner or with a professional engineer, or who are you dealing with?
Engineer's office. We were talking on email back and forth today, and nothing came in this evening just before the hearing.
All right. Well, why don't we put this on for the July agenda? But in the interim, if you would contact the engineer and say that that's a requirement for a certificate of compliance.
Yes. Or I reiterate that to them.
Yes. All right. Perfect. So we'll put that on for July 12th. Next on the agenda is request for certificate of compliance 175 Governor Stoughton Lane. Now, is that for the whole project, or what is that?
That is for the whole project, John.
All right, so I shall recuse myself as I have throughout this. And I won't go far, but if somebody could, Hans, you're probably the most proficient at texting. If you could text me when to come back. All right?
Sure. Yep.
Thank you. Thanks all.
For everybody's information, I looked at the order of conditions, and there's a requirement in the order of conditions that they put up signage regarding the vernal pool that is out there. And submit their proposed signage to the commission for their review and approval. Okay, so I let Mr. Rosati know, as well as Mr. Mastroani, I believe his name is, of Pulte, about 2 weeks ago of this requirement, and have not heard back. We are also in discussions with them about 2 trees in Basin 6. One of the mature trees is a pin oak. It's dead. The other mature tree is another pin oak. It's dying. I suggested that the Pulte company should take care of the trees before they request a certificate of compliance. The trees are certainly not in very good shape. They could fall on private property. And so I got some pushback from Mr. Rosati of Pulte, and he said, that's not fair. We were asked to leave the trees. And I said, you weren't asked to leave dead and dying trees. That was my response to him. So I haven't heard a word from them.
Steve, any idea why those trees failed and are in the process of failing?
Yes. Number one, their water regime changed radically because they get water now a couple times a year, right up over their roots. And number two, there was some additional fill put into the basin and additional fill forming a berm directly adjacent to the trees. All of which could affect the trees in a negative way.
Right.
Sorry to say.
Yeah, and my second question was, for some reason, my recollection was that there was more than one vernal pool site.
That is correct.
Okay, you said one, or you didn't say one, but you just said vernal pool, and
that was
I thought there were more than one.
Yes.
Okay.
That was in the order, and there's one that has been certified so far. I'm waiting for some dry land to certify the second. And the third one, I just got the information, was it earlier this year or was it last year? But that'll never be dry. That's the problem. There's a requirement for dry vernal pool. The third one is on the south side, or as you go up the Woodlot Road, it's on the right-hand side as you go up the road. There is a pooling area for water, and then it goes over a very, very steep slope into a culvert and underneath Unquity Road in that area. That one probably will never be certified by Natural Heritage because it is a stream still running and because we'll not see it dry, which is a requirement. So there are 2 on the left-hand side as you go up.
Those are the ones that I had in my mind. Yeah.
Right. So there are 2 back there. And one of these days when I get the right photographs, I will be able to certify this, send in the certification, the second one to Natural Heritage.
So even now in a drought year, it's still holding water.
Haven't looked at it in the past 2 months, sorry to say. And that's all I have.
And just, I thought that there were actually 2 orders of conditions.
Yes, we'll get to the next one in the next number 9.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, if they haven't met
they haven't met the orders and a request, of course. Yeah, I just think before they hand it over to the HOA, they just should cut the dying and dead tree.
And so for the planting requirement, there isn't an 80% survival?
Actually, there is. And, some of the plants were just put in this past spring. So we should probably ask them to wait until 2 years have gone by. Okay. Thank you, Hans. That's a good point.
Thank you, Hans.
And that's it for that one. Would you like to go on to the next? And number 9 is also Pulte.
I'm fine with moving on to the next one.
Okay. Okay,
I don't know
let
if
me
anyone else is.
let me just say that that's a certificate of compliance. They've done the road is complete. To my satisfaction, I'm not sure anybody else's. And the guardrail materials have been removed. And I think you were sent photos of a couple of photos of that area.
Yes.
That you probably saw 2 months ago, perhaps it was, we were out there. Yeah. And so somebody needs to make a motion.
Steve, do you think that certificate should be issued?
Yes, there were no plantings required there.
Yeah, Tom, for if it helps, that was for the realignment of the road right up from the what's that road? Is that
Unquity, Harlan,
Unquity.
Unquity, Harlan, Unquity.
And yeah, in Harlan. So that's since been stabilized. There's some guardrail they pulled out. There were erosion controls that were running along Unquity that had still been in place. They had tried to add it under their existing order of conditions, but at the time, I think I felt that it was far enough away that it should be under a separate notice of intent application.
Yes.
So the work is done, stabilized, and I think they've met all the requirements there. So if everyone else is okay, I think I'll make a motion to approve that order of conditions.
I'll second it.
Okay.
This is number 9, right? Hans? Yep.
So I guess I'll step in unless Arthur wants to.
Please proceed, Hans.
Okay. So just asking for a roll call vote. Arthur?
Yes.
Ingrid?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And myself is I. Yes.
Great. Thank you all. And I guess we can text Mr. Cannon back.
We can see the door he went out of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a hobbit door, sort of. Ah, there he is.
There he is.
Right.
We see you, John.
Thanks, Hans.
That was quick.
Yeah, it was quick. Good, thank you. Unquity Road, did you do both of them or is?
We did both, yes.
You did? Oh, good. So we've got a revised landscape plan at 593 Blue Hill Avenue. Yes or no?
No, we had a request to came in from Jeff Kane. Did you not see that, John?
I'm sorry, a request to continue it?
Yes, till July.
No, I missed that one.
And the reason is he's out of town right now. That's all.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
But everything was done. Everything was done, which is great.
Yeah, I think the issue though that remains for us, Steve, and for everybody, is that they want to come back in and reduce their bond.
Oh yeah.
Because the bond is in the amount of 67,500, something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think I think we need a bond, which is great, but certainly not at that level.
Sure.
All right, so that completes our agenda, and except for additional business.
One piece I was asked by Mr. Wild if I could accompany him to a property on the Neponset River sometime in the next week or so, where he wants to build a couple of houses. And upon reflection, I'm considering not doing that until he has a plan in place. That might put me into a difficult situation if I make a recommendation and then he takes it and then the commission has a problem with it. So it might be useful for him to hire a consultant and then have the consultant make the recommendation rather than me. That's all. I would like to hear what the commission has to say about that. That was brought up to me by a person in the DPW office when I mentioned it.
Yeah, my gut reaction is that you might want to avoid that one. Because if you're the consultant to the applicant and it's, where is he building?
Somewhere on the Deposit River. I don't even know the location yet.
There aren't a whole lot, not a whole lot of places to build on the deposit. I don't think.
Right next to you, John.
Wow. Uh-oh. Who was that? Yeah, I wasn't processing it, but who was the person?
Mr. Wild, the same person who is working at 1 Elliott Street. He will be doing some borings, I would imagine, very soon, next month, on that site.
Got it. Okay. All right. I'm sure we have some other additional business. Arthur, did you have? Oh, I know. One of them is the Superfund. Was the Superfund Zoom meeting was this evening?
It was.
Unfortunately, it was the same time.
Yeah, it was at 6:30, and it was very well presented and conducted. Very large number of attendees with several Milton representatives. They are looking at a 5-step process: the assessment, characterization, remedy selection, cleanup afterwards, and then the post-consultation period relative to operation and maintenance, and then it'll come off the national priority list. Currently, it's in the characterization phase. They do not know how long that will last because in the exploration of the river, they don't know what they're going to find. And it's not just in terms of possible chemicals, but other types of debris that may be in the riverbed and the amount of time that it would take to locate and excavate that. They expressed extreme caution with respect to anybody engaging in that 3.7 mile length of the waterway while they are doing their borings and related research. That's a quick synopsis. They have, and I can share these, be happy to do so, contact people for communication from the EPA, who will be overseeing the relationship with Boston and with Milton as the work continues on the river.
And I was told when I inquired that the Zoom meeting will be available on the internet as well.
Yes, it was recorded tonight.
Great. Steve, can you send us a link when it is available?
When it's available, I'd be happy to, absolutely.
That would be great. Thank you.
Where did John go?
I saw an email from Chase Berkeley today that I responded to about the stormwater detention basin along Pine Tree Brook, the path there. Looks like there was a piece of equipment that got a bit too close to the edge of that, the edge of is that a drainage structure? I don't know if we ever came to a conclusion on that.
I didn't see anything draining into it, Hans, but I think it was probably done at the same time as the other basins there along the brook. Yeah.
It looks like a piece of mowing equipment or something got too close to the edge and ended up going into the drainage structure. But unfortunately, it's actually narrowed the path through that area. And so
where is this exactly?
So
I would say 200 feet from Blue Hill Parkway.
Parkway.
Yeah,
Upstream or downstream?
downstream.
Yeah, there's a path that goes along there.
Yep.
We're
Yep.
mowing that.
So somebody, I'm guessing from the town, went through and mowed it. And as I said, it looked like the machine dumped into and took out a kind of the sidewall of that basin. And so now it's actually narrowed the path to so it's not just a destabilized bank, but it's also a bit of a hazard at this point because someone could easily fall in there.
Where are you talking about, Hans? Something happened to my computer, so I'm just back in by telephone.
Sure.
Oh.
Where were you referring to?
It's on the Pine Tree Brook path by Blue Hills Parkway.
About 200 feet downstream from the parkway, John. I was over there, what, 2 weeks ago, Hans, when you first told me about it?
Yeah.
Also told Chase about it. Didn't hear a thing back. Went back again late last week. Took photos and then told him about it again. And he responded this time.
What should happen, Steve?
What should happen? The bank should be restabilized, very simply.
In addition to that, it's probably worth having a discussion with, once hopefully Chase is able to identify who did that work, because he seems to think it was it was part of the Pine Tree Brook cleanup effort, which I corrected him on that and told him that was not. Yeah, to maybe have a discussion with the mowing crews as to the extent or the impact of the mowing, because they went right up to the edges of the wetland and stream. So they did some pretty aggressive cutting.
Yes.
Wouldn't be surprised if there's other areas that were done similarly. That is all.
So what needs to be restored? I mean, I missed the first part of it, Hans, but
so the machine, well, whatever piece of equipment was being used to do the work, looks like it actually dumped over the side of the basin and took out the top of the edge of the basin, and it's also narrowed the path along the edge of the basin. So there's a good, what would you say, 10 by 10 area at least?
Yes.
On a slope that's been completely torn up and destabilized.
Now, is this above the basin or the brook?
Say again, please.
I asked where I'm visualizing in my mind. What I imagine is a heavy piece of equipment pushed down a slope. But was that slope over the brook, or over one of those basins that are on the other side of the path?
So it's within the 25-foot limit of the edge of the stream, but it's in the basin. So it's immediately adjacent to the stream.
It's surprising that just the weight of a mower would collapse the bank of one of those basins, but that's what happened, huh? I'm
not sure what type of equipment was used. I know that the consolidated facilities have multiple types of mowing equipment that are of various sizes. So I'm not sure exactly, but something had, decent enough tires to you can see the tire imprints that are larger than like a push mower or a double mower. It was a good sized piece of equipment. It probably took some doing to get it back out again.
Huh.
At least, yes. Maybe another piece of equipment.
Likely another piece of equipment.
Right.
So somebody, I'm guessing, put their head down and kind of kept quiet about it.
Right.
Do we need to issue an emergency order so they can fix it?
I would recommend for now getting Chase
or someone else from Consolidated Facilities involved, maybe to take a look at it, maybe with the commission, if there is any upcoming site walk, to make sure they are well aware of it and have a clear understanding of the issue, and they get it sorted out as soon as possible.
I would agree with that, Hans.
So under our new regulation, is this the soft notice?
Yes.
Is that what you're suggesting? The letter?
And not even a letter, John. I think it's small enough that it doesn't really need a letter, but you know, maybe a person to person. I've been, you know, I've had a couple of emails with Chase back and forth about it. But maybe it's time to, you know, directly confront him and say, Chase, come with me. That's all.
Yeah, maybe we could keep it sort of person to person.
Yes, I would like to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good first step.
It can probably be fixed. It just needs to be done.
Right.
Okay.
And it's a good exercise we'll go through, because that'll alert the Consolidated Facilities regarding we are watching. That's all. I think that's a good exercise.
Yeah, and you know, as I said, they were, whoever executed the work was pretty aggressive in the vegetation removal. So
yes, yes. And you know, we may find that it was a 16-year-old. You know.
Well, that's just the point, Steve. My son did that for a number of years during his high school and college years, and he loved nothing more than running those mowers wherever he could. So you may be right, spot on, and just somebody didn't have the right mentorship or background experience when they were doing what they thought was their responsibility.
Sure, we'll get them to you know, do the ice rink next, Zamboni. You know, I have a nephew that does Zamboni up for UNH.
I would never give my son a Zamboni.
Sorry.
You wouldn't give his sons a Zamboni either.
Right.
Especially the one that's just like the father. Oh boy, won't care. John, I have a couple of items.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. I can't get back in. I don't know what happened to my computer, but go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh, it just came on.
This begs the indulgence of the conservation calendar. The select board is, oh, there you are, John. You are back.
Hi, John.
Oh, good.
The select board is probably going to change its meeting calendar from the second and fourth Wednesdays of every month to the second and fourth Tuesdays. That's going to run right up against our traditional meeting date, aside from tonight, of course, of the second Tuesday. And I was wondering if there was any possibility that the Conservation Commission could make a shift to the first and the third, the third Tuesday of the month instead of the second Tuesday of the month, unless that's a hardship for somebody, or go to one of the Wednesday night that would be vacated by the select board, the second Wednesday. So instead of the second Tuesday, it could be the second Wednesday, or it could be, if you want to stay on Tuesday, the third Tuesday, if that would be possible.
It's good with me, Arthur. I mean, I could do Tuesdays. I could do the first or the third Tuesday of the month. I teach on Monday and Wednesday. Although last semester I taught Monday and Thursday, but traditionally it's been Monday and Wednesday. So I prefer to keep it on a Tuesday. But either the first or the third would be
I would
great.
as well. I would as well keep it on a Tuesday.
So we could go to the first or the third, and that would be okay on Tuesday. Is that okay with everybody else?
Yeah, that's fine, Arthur.
Okay, thank you very much for your.
But we should choose one just so that we could start
Right.
the plan.
When
All
does,
right,
when does the change, does the change occur? Remind me?
it would be in August,
Oh, okay, okay.
and we have a select board meeting. You're anticipating beautifully, Ingrid. And we have a select board meeting tomorrow at which we hope to finalize this. So I can follow up very quickly thereafter. A second, thank you again. A second point is the incident that we had, John and colleagues, must be about 8 weeks ago, where there was serious tree removal and stone wall damage on a scenic road down toward Milton Street and Brush Hill Road. Do you remember that? Yeah, the site walk.
Right. Yeah, right near the Flatley Field and the old.
One of the things that crossed my mind based upon what I've seen from time to time in other communities is the posting of scenic roads as scenic roads, so that contractors and other parties, plus we had proximity to wetlands right across the street. So in a number of communities, I've seen a posting when you're on a scenic road that's designated by the community saying that it is a scenic road and that regulations apply. And the problem is, if you don't post the scenic road as a scenic road, things like that are going to happen. So I just wondered whether or not, based on that experience, there was any merit to the possibility of the Conservation Commission entertaining any value to posting such roads as scenic ways and suggesting to other bodies such as the Planning Board, the Historic District Commission, the Select Board, that Milton follow suit. It's always hard to repair damage. It doesn't cost a lot to put signs in place.
Arthur, I think it's a great idea, but to be blunt, we've got some money saved up and hopefully we'll be able to utilize that money to purchase some open space. I know John Cronin was hell bent on getting that lot of land. Wendy, you'll remember this because I think your church may or may not have had an interest in the land, but right across from the library.
Oh, good.
So I'm going to sound like a cheapskate here, but wouldn't this be more for the historical society?
Well, I don't think this would be anything more than a recommendation from the Concom to the other bodies, and that they would have the responsibility of coming up with the financial resources. My guess is that this could easily fall within DPW's work here, also the Select Board. We'd have to have input from them. We'd request input from, of course, the historic group. Steve O'Donnell is president of that. He was there that day. The Planning Board, their chair was there that day. And then the Board of Selectmen. It's going to be a town sign, so we don't have to go to the sign committee. But we usually do like we did on the design of the Conservation Commission signs.
Right.
That have been ordered, just as a courtesy, give them an opportunity for input. So the only thing that I'm suggesting for us is whether or not we want to make such a recommendation.
Did the signs be posted? Yeah, I think that's easy. I think that's a good idea.
I agree.
How many scenic roads are there in town?
That's a good question, Tom. I honestly don't know.
Arthur, it might also be helpful to understand which board or committee is responsible for that designation. Is it the Historic Commission? Is it the Planning? And so who owns compliance with that?
I thought it was historic. Didn't we just have an issue, Steve, you'd remember this, on Hillside Street where somebody wanted to change their driveway entrance? And it was a stone wall. and they wanted to open an area of the stone wall, but rebuild it at the other end. It was close to the intersection of Harlan Street and Hillside Road. I can't remember the number. It was, all I can think of was like 159 Hillside.
I do not remember.
I thought that was the historic commission that was involved in that, because they had to get a permit to change the wall. But isn't that with whom we met when we were at the after the location on Brush Hill Road?
Yes, the historic commission was there and the planning board also.
Right. I think the historic commission has jurisdiction over scenic roads.
That would be my first stop.
Don't they get part of the CPA money?
Yes.
Because I know everybody's going to be pushing the budget into somebody else's lap, but they have a funding source. I know we do as well. I get it, but
I don't think this would pertain to us financially. We're just passing on a recommendation for other parties to do something. We could send this to the historic commission with copies to the planning board and to the board of selectmen.
Sounds like a good idea. Does that need a motion for a resolution?
I think that's the smart thing to do.
All right. So do you want to make the motion that we pass a resolution to encourage the, should we say the historic commission, or should we say the appropriate town body?
I think you're leaning in the right direction.
Duck, dodge, and hide.
It says that the Milton Planning Board has a scenic roads checklist.
That was
okay.
That was my leaning too.
Oh.
But
Section 13 of the Planning Board's rules and regulations.
So why don't we just send it to all three of them?
Sure. And the motion is?
As you were saying, to encourage the appropriate town body to designate with signage all scenic roads in the town of Milton.
Yeah, any roads designated as scenic under the town bylaws.
Right.
I'm sorry.
I think that's correct. Rather than designating it, just to do the signs for that which is already designated.
I missed that altogether. I'm sorry. Hans,
you got to say it again.
I'm sorry, to recommend that utilize signage on
you said
any
roads
roads designated as scenic
under the town
bylaws. The town bylaws.
Sounds good.
Who made that motion?
Arthur.
Okay.
Second? Any seconds?
I'll second.
All right, thanks, Tom. Any discussion? All in favor of Arthur, how say you?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Hans?
Yep.
Tom?
Yes.
Ingrid?
Yes.
John? Yes.
Okay.
Unanimous.
I'll pass it along as a unanimous recommendation.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur.
Well, let's save hopefully some damage, some time, some money, a lot of other things if we're able to carry this off. I know in other towns where they've posted it, as I've worked throughout the Northeast, you can't touch a tree on a scenic highway. You can't touch a stone wall. You can't repave it without getting a permit.
Yeah, that's where the planning board and the tree warden come in typically.
To me, the most scenic road down is Canton Ave, particularly the end down by Walcott Woods.
That's right.
It is. It's a very pretty road.
I bet the Friends of Blue Hills Parkway would beg to disagree.
Touché.
True enough. All right, do we have
I'll add the
additional business?
copy to the tree warden and to anybody else who comes to mind. Thanks for that suggestion, Hans.
Any other additional business? Good to go.
Good to
Thank-
go.
Thank you all. Motion to adjourn.
John, I'll just mention that tomorrow night, the select board is going to entertain an alternative to the proposed work at Algerine Corner. The alternative site that's been identified is behind Cunningham School. And the state has apparently approved the reallocation of the money from Algerine Corner to that site.
Will it drain the same area?
No, it won't. It's just another, it's a separate project. Really unrelated because of location, Tom,
Yeah,
between Edge Hill Road and Pleasant Street.
yeah.
Equity Brook is not in there, which leaves open, of course, the whole question of Algerine Corner for some type of future resolution. I think it's still trying to be ascertained whether or not that's Chapter 97 property.
Article 97.
I mean, formally it is seen as such, but I don't think the town has received anything in writing yet from the appropriate parties at the state level to that effect.
And Arthur, I should inform you that I did some flagging there probably a year ago.
Behind Cunningham?
Yes. There's an isolated vegetated wetland.
Yep.
Confined as you go from down to up. I'm sorry, I don't remember the street is. What is that street right there?
Pleasant, maybe.
Pleasant, yes, from Pleasant Street. The trail breaks off and it goes off to the right and then it goes up the hill as well. In between the two portions of the trail is the location of that little wetland, isolated wetland.
That's right.
I was told by the environmental coordinator at the time, Erica, that the basin would be on the right-hand side of the trail away from where I flagged the wetland, just to let you know.
Okay.
Yes, I should tell you that the DPW asked me to write an opinion about that project when they had design plans or like 25% or something. And yes, they were going to put the basin across that paved path, as you say. It would be to the west in the larger flat, wooded flat. It's a very large wooded flat.
Yes, exactly.
And, yeah, and it apparently is very permeable too, because when they built Cunningham Collicott, rebuilt it the last time, they put a basin up at the top by the road that goes around the schools, and that discharges down the slope. And there's a sand channel where you can see the water has a run. But when it gets to the bottom of the slope, the channel disappears immediately because the water just gets drunken right up by those very sandy soils. So from an engineering point of view, I think they picked an absorptive area to catch this water. But I didn't do any borings. They just asked me about the trees. I said that the trees probably would not be affected.
Deep into the last century, I used to take that path from when I went to Collicott and Cunningham. And that was always a fascinating area in there. It's unchanged from all those years ago.
Big trees in there.
They sure are.
And I think I saw slippery elm in there too, Tom.
That would be a surprise. You know, I don't think your wetland is really a wetland. I know I never like to disagree with you, but it is really on the edge of being a wetland.
Agreed.
I know there's a obligate plant in there, namely spice bush.
Yes.
But I was there twice this spring and there was no standing water.
Yes, spice bush is not an obligate plant, nor does a wetland have to have standing water, actually.
True, yes. I think, you know, don't have any axe to grind in this, but to me, I looked at those flags and thought, maybe I wouldn't have found a well in there. But You probably looked at the soils, didn't you?
I did.
Yes. Well, I wouldn't bet on my opinion on this one.
Well, historically, we've mapped that twice before. Back when the schools were rehabbed in 2000.
Huh. Oh,
we
yeah.
did it. And I can't tell you who did it, but it was done because the commission was out there. And we did it, well, actually, I think we used old maps about 6 years ago. The Collycott Parent Teachers Organization wanted, and the county again wanted to build a playground.
That's right, John.
We did it again. So it's the third time it's been mapped.
There is a very pretty playground up on top of the slope. If you're facing the school, it's off to the left side. And it's under a grove of pines. And it's been recently redone and fenced. And it's really a beautiful spot with completely floored by the pine needles up there.
That's nice.
Right.
Very good. But let me go back, Arthur. When you said that the state grant had been transferred over to this area.
Let me take a look, John, for the agenda item for you so that you have the wording. It'll be to repurpose the funds of the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection 319 grant for construction of Algerine Corner stormwater best management practices to be used instead for the construction of the school stormwater best management practices located at the Collycott School.
My question is, and Algerine Corner certainly been controversial, and Jerry Burke has been a passionate advocate about protecting it in its current state. Moving the grant will not clean the water coming down Adams Street. My thought was, and it's never been before us. We participated in the joint meeting a year plus ago, but my thought all along was that, although I generally like rain gardens, isn't it possible to both clean the water coming off of Adams Street before it gets into Unquity Brook and preserve the surface, the parkland? If it's 97, fine, just put underground basins to do the recharge work and not touch the surface.
That's one of the alternatives that Jerry Burke proposed. And what would you think of on a future agenda of the Conservation Commission, inviting in Marina and Chase to discuss that as an alternative possibility? Because I agree with you that that area has to be made better than it is right now. I was down there last summer, and the algae in that section of Unquity Brook was shore to shore. You could walk on it if it was hard.
Yeah. I actually brought it up with Miranda. It must be almost a year ago now, after that first meeting. And I know she was, I think she probably thought that I was talking for Jerry Burke, and I was not. But I asked her, why not just put it underground? Use a big Cultec chamber, and you can clean the water that way. And you're not going to touch the surface. And she said, that's not the best management practice. It must be a rain garden. And I dropped it. I didn't push it because it wasn't before us anyway, but I always intended to bring it up as an alternatives analysis for cleaning the water and maintaining the park.
Hans was shaking his head in the affirmative to
affirmative what?
What you said.
The 319 grant would have probably required a certain design that of a rain garden or something similar. So that was probably language in the grant that dictated what the type of BMP would need to be.
And the reason for that, I believe, may be because you can clean a rain garden a heck of a lot easier than you can clean underneath the salt.
It depends on what you're cleaning it for, though. If you're talking about sedimentation, that's one thing. Jerry Burke's concern and some of the neighbors' concern was always you're putting in, E. coli that's coming in off the roadway runoff, which in turn is runoff from old septic systems. And that was his concern, and it's a legitimate concern. You don't want that on the surface water, the E. coli collecting. But if you could put it underground, you could protect the public and get rid of the E. coli before it gets into the brook.
I would say that my mind is sort of unmade up about which cleans water better. A tank that you empty now and then does not clean runoff, I think, as well as plants and soil.
I'm talking about recharging it from the tanks as opposed to having it in like an open basin.
Yeah.
And that was Jerry's big objection.
I see that. Yeah. If you go in a tank and recharge from the tank, yeah, it never gets to the surface. I see your point there.
I think the issue is probably a little more simple than that, is that now the town needs to find a way to pay for it. That wasn't, they had grant money to execute the project, and now that money is going somewhere else. So that means that.
Well, isn't that what's on the agenda for the select board as to whether or not to request the transfer, or has it already been done?
The select board would approve the transfer. It would have to approve the transfer. The state has said it's okay to do it.
See, cleaning it upstream is not going to take the contaminants coming off of Adams Hill.
Right.
Out of the
So
brook.
that goes back to, I think, what Hans was referring to, and that is there would be a need for another grant proposal that would come up with an acceptable solution for Algerine Corner.
But in the meantime, nothing's going to be done.
Right. So that's why I was suggesting that maybe we have a discussion at a future, as an agenda item in a future Conservation Commission meeting, to discuss what possible alternatives there are for future grants. Or grants for alternative solutions. There will be grant money available.
Well, isn't this all part of the EPA's requirement now that we address the point discharges on riverways, and that each municipality is required to clean up their discharge points? I thought that's what was driving the grants, because the feds required each municipality to do it. And the struggle was that the towns had to pay it. The EPA ordered it, but the towns have to pay it. And therefore the state was providing some grant money to get that done. And that's what I thought this grant was designed to do, was to clean the discharge. The discharge point is actually Gulliver's Creek, because that's where the water is ending up.
Ultimately, before it goes into the Neponset.
Into the Neponset, right. But all the testing data is from the Neponset, saying, okay, our E. coli levels, our phosphorus levels are X, Y, and Z. And that's what they're trying to clean.
I saw a map that showed the testing sites where they determined what's in the water, and Algerine Corner was not one of them, but down at the intersection of Adams Street and Squantum Street was one of the test sites. So maybe I can find that document and get it for us to take a look at.
I know from my years and years of water testing in EPRA, I'm the oldest serving water tester, that Unquity Brook is famed in the whole watershed as having some of the dirtiest coli levels, highest in Milton for sure, and highest in any other town but in Norwood. And the association has been trying for years to hunt down the source of bacteria, and has worked on the police station and Milton Academy, and hasn't really found the source yet. But that's why there's a focus, I think, on Unquity Brook, because not only is it a hot spot, but as you know, the smelt spawning bed is right ahead of Gulliver's Creek. So NEPRA has always looked at the worst impacted areas as a place to focus remediation. And I would be sorry if the cleaning that the Algerine Basin would perform is not going to get done.
Yeah, me too. I always thought there was an alternative to doing it.
There has to be a solution somewhere.
To me, the fact that water that has coli will be retained briefly in the basin does not seem to me likely to make people sick, but I'm not an expert. For instance, there's coli in goose poop and coli in dog poop. And a lot of that ends up on lawns that kids play on, and kids do not seem to get sick from it, but I am just speculating. My feeling about algerine was the kids could still use it. It would be like the basins along Pine Tree Brook. They don't take up all the space, and they fill up with wildflowers. So people can play tag around them, but they're not barred from using the area. But it's sort of not our issue, I think, although it's certainly worth talking about.
Well, Jerry Burke's concern was that the park department, I'm sorry, the DBW had never filed a notice of intent. So that's why it never came before us. The time that we did have a meeting, which was back in March of 2021, was a joint meeting, announced public meeting with the DPW, and the presentation was made. But we, on our agenda and the public meeting notification was very clear. There is nothing before us by way of a permit application. We do not anticipate a vote. It was actually on the agenda. And we didn't, it was just informational. And at that time, we were just listening, and Jerry was upset, and some of the neighbors that he was leading were upset because, you know, we weren't doing anything. And I said, Jerry, he was on the commission at the time. He said, there's nothing before us, but they will have to file because it's an alteration of protected land. It's jurisdictional for us. So it will come, but it never did.
Yeah, they would have filed once they received the grant money because that's, you know, the process.
That was what they intended. Here's a thought. It may be bad, but that's a piece of land that's under the jurisdiction of the select board now, as we had reinforced at town meeting. Whether or not it turns out to be Chapter 97 land, would the Conservation Commission want to bring it under its jurisdiction? Now, but Jerry was claiming that it was parkland, but it's not parkland. It's under the jurisdiction of the select board. Maybe we want to think about whether or not we want to ask the select board to turn it over to the Conservation Commission.
Are you thinking for as part of the land swap, or are you talking about for purposes of getting state money to clean the water coming off of Adams Street?
More the latter, because it's a very small piece of land. It's not going to add a lot to the land swap, although you could put it in that package too. That may be a nice way to do it, John.
But the issue would remain, would you put the detention basin above ground as a rain garden, or would you put it underground to recharge through the soils, but without exposing the E. coli laden water?
All this possibility would do is give us more of an opportunity to initiate and engage in conversation and planning.
Sure.
Isn't it true that the little corner is already jurisdictional because it's
yes, it is
proximity to the brook?
Yeah,
it is. It's clearly jurisdiction. The whole piece of land.
But if it were Concom specific, that would give us maybe more leverage. Maybe we don't need it.
The only thing that would change is we would be the actual property owner.
That's right.
Deeded, but I don't think that would really change anything.
No, because we've got jurisdiction over it anyway.
And it wouldn't,
I was just trying to think of ways.
so pocket parks, there's multiple instances across the state. I can think of a few that where Article 97 jurisdiction has been established. So, even for just easement purposes. So I think that the applicability of Article 97 may be changing with the upcoming legislation, regulations, and clarification from MIPA. So I think that that gap will likely be closed in the coming year or two.
Oh, good. So I want to put this on a sidebar for a while?
I don't think, I'm not sure we've got a role right now because it's on your agenda tomorrow night. And I'm not sure what you're going to do. I thought we could.
Well, there are two separate things, John. One is doing the project behind Collycott Cunningham schools now. But what we're really talking about, I think, is aside from that, what should be done with Algerine Corner?
Okay, that, and you're right, that is different. I'm hung up on the first one because I'm concerned that I have no data about whether or not the water coming off the hill behind Cunningham and Collycott going down towards Brook Road, whether or not that's contaminated. So what's the purpose of the grant there? Are they really going to clean water?
Yes.
Is it contaminated there?
Yeah, they're not taking the water from the school. The school already has its own stormwater system built about 20 years ago. Where this will drain from is an area of like 12 or 15 blocks that's west along Pleasant and south of Pleasant too. So on the other side of Cunningham, right now there is a pipe that goes under the school and down the hill and through that wooded area and out to the drain under Pleasant. So what they will do is they will cut into that pipe at the top of the slope and divert it into the woods, into a basin. And then at the lower end of the woods, they will put in another drain so it can go back in the pipe. But I doubt we'll ever have a storm that requires that second drain. At any rate, the diversion from the pipe will be such that it doesn't end flow in the pipe, but it takes the first flush, as they call it, the first part of a storm, which is the part that gets the pollutants from the roads. So they're aiming to intercept that road wash before it goes straight to Unquity Brook through Pleasant Street.
Correct.
But is this road runoff from Pleasant or is it from Edge Hill? Is that on a
Edge Hill, excuse me. It's an uphill area. It's all areas uphill beyond Cunningham Collycott. So including a chunk of Cunningham Park and the tight residential streets that are westerly along Edge Hill. I figured out what the drainage basin was just by looking closely at the contours of the Milton GIS and figuring out what area drains to the catch basins along that stretch of Edge Hill.
I understand the mechanics of it, and I understand what you just said, but my question is really pretty simple. Which water is dirtier? That coming off of Adams Street down the hill, which we know is filled with E. coli, or, what's the contamination level of the water draining behind Cunningham and Collycott?
Well, I think the reason that Unquity is dirty is not the road wash from Adams Street, because Adams Street doesn't have any more poop than any other street. The reason the Unquity stormwater is dirty is perhaps because of those big sewage pipes that go through the area. At any rate, those are underground. The reason it's thought that they might flow into Unquity, that's how Unquity gets dirty, but it's still poorly understood why Unquity is so dirty, but it's not thought to be road wash. I would say the degree of coli in the road wash is dependent on the size of the watershed. The more roads, the more coli, but it won't be sufficient to trigger the hotspot like you have in Unquity. That's my understanding of why Unquity is dirty. It's not because of road wash, but buried sewer pipes that are linking into it somehow.
That makes more sense.
It will, this Algerine basin has its own watershed of roads that will drain toward it. And I think you're right, it includes a portion of Adams Street, but it might be other streets as well. I don't really know.
You've got that whole area on the other side, Sean. Chesterfield Road, Houghton Place.
Yes. And do you remember years ago when there was a turd geyser there? We had a tremendous storm and the sewer pipes in that whole neighborhood overflowed and the streets like Otis were full of sewage. And you knew after it drained away because you could see the little bits of toilet paper over everybody's lawn. And that was when they had to put in the pump station they put down there. You remember that?
Yeah.
It's concealed behind some shrubs and so forth. But that was their scheme to prevent that from happening again. We will force the sewage that is local into the big trunk so it can't back up and come out of the manholes and flood the neighborhood. And as I understand it, after they put that pump station in, it's never happened again. Those local sewage feeders have backed up because now that sewage is forced into the big pipe.
All right. Well, I don't think there's anything for us to do with this juncture, Arthur.
Agreed. That's why I suggested a sidebar for the future.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Motion
All right.
to adjourn, Mr. Chairman?
What's that?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, yes, sir.
I think we should fix everything right now.
All right, we can do some of it tomorrow. All
Was
right,
that a
all in
second,
favor of-
Tom?
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Ingrid, are you opposed?
No.
Oh, there you are. Okay, all right. All right, good night, Steve. Thank you very much for all the wonderful work you do. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Good
Thank
night,
you,
all.
Steve.
Yep.
Thank you, John. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Good night.
Right.
Good night now.
Night, Hans. Night, Steve.
Happy